Hello and welcome to episode 159 of The Imperial Truth. I'm Greg. Joining me, as always, is Mr. Howard. Hello, Howard.
Hello, Greg. How you doing? You all right?
Yeah, not bad. You?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good, actually. Yeah, we're on the back, coming out the back of all the hot weather. It's pretty good now. Can get the paints back out again without fear of them evaporating.
A proper British summer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's what we like. Don't like that. None of this really hot weather.
Sunshine. What? Back
I'm
on?
far too white for that. Proper
You
English white.
Yeah.
Proper pasty white.
Translucent white. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, the electricity for having fans on all night, it just hurts my soul to spend the money.
Smart meters, and you just watch them as they just
Yeah, indeed,
spin
especially at the
around.
moment.
Tears inducing. Yeah.
It's all good fun. We should probably talk Element Games. Loads of toys. All the toys, whatever you want to buy, available at Element Games. All the heresy, all the paints, all the brushes.
All the heresy again after a lot of it was not available for quite a bit of time.
Yeah, absolutely. GW still trying to catch up. Even with their that's one thing I didn't dig out and look through actually was they did their report again, didn't they? Their summer report.
They did. Yes, I haven't read that in detail. I've read a couple of.
No, I've seen some good things, which basically like. Let's talk Element Games first.
Yeah.
So Element Games. Loads of toys.
That was a record for us, wasn't it, to go off on a tangent? We did it pretty much immediately.
We've done it before doing the adverts. To be fair, whether you want even more boxes of the Age of Darkness because it's still quite tempting. Even if you just want like two of the items in there, it's like, well, by the time they come out individually, you're halfway.
Might as well get all the extra stuff. Yeah, you're right. It does add up that way.
Indeed, and we will get those extra the other heavy weapons box out and all that soon, I'm sure, and all the usual stuff. Yes, Element Games.
Lots of hobby out as well. Lots of funky new contrast paints.
Oh yeah, the new contrast paints. Kill Team.
Big fan of the new shades that make pin washing.
New shades, yeah. New Warcry stuff looks really cool. Yes. Just
I'm going to disagree with that one, but we'll circle back to that.
No, you disagree.
I know. I'm shocked too.
Shocking.
I know.
Shocking. It's not stuff I would personally play in Warcry. I think it looks good. All the stuff, and you can help support the show by going through the link in the show notes or the website or posted on wherever social medias at various times.
Across all channels. There we go.
Across all channels, indeed. And even if you want to go and buy, I need a TikTok account, I suppose. If you're into the books, remember that you can get all those from Element as well, and they usually arrive really promptly, which is always good. Wonderful stuff, and of course, if you are up that way or whatever, they have got obviously in Stockport, they've got their venue as well. So loads of gaming going on there. There we go. We got that one out of the way. Yeah, the summer report was interesting. Money from IPs being up. Mm-hmm. I like the doom mongering that appears whenever GW releases a financial statement. It is absolutely. I had someone, I was like, that person took 40 minutes to get up GW is struggling. I was like, yeah, going to be bought by Hasbro every year since 1994 or something. GW's been struggling. Like
Milton Bradley suddenly make another app come out of nowhere, but bang, we got you now.
Yeah, absolutely. Going into 2022 wasn't as good as 2021 when some people were still in lockdown, and shocker.
Yeah,
that's unbelievable, Jeff. It's always wait and then you wait. It's that cycle, isn't it? It's remembering that cycle. If you do ever want to buy stocks, remember their January report always sees their price go up because it's usually got the summer numbers in it for starters on the big box they've released. I don't think GW are going anywhere at the moment. I don't think it's indicative of a failure of any game system that they might be a couple of million quid down on last year.
I think there was some interesting discussions, I thought, about how they had been, just from a purely business perspective, how they had been handling the increases costs in shipping,
Right.
specifically the customs charges that they were being hit by in the millions, obviously, because of what they're shipping around. And obviously, we're hearing a lot about that at the moment with tailbacks of how long now in Kent and Dover and stuff. All getting a bit grim. So them moving stuff around apparently is proving it's hitting their
Big time.
margins. Yeah. So they're logistically, which I still
And the
hold them
plans.
up as an example. I mean, you think a weekly global release of a new product launched in all territories simultaneously, still, I think, an impressive, by any metric, that is an impressive feat.
And might be
Albeit,
the reason. And might be the reason why we haven't seen things that they've shown off recently.
well, yeah, quite,
Because it's
yeah,
not easy to get things moved around the world still.
yeah,
For I say for various reasons, including like local and global. Um, just getting the stuff in isn't always easy. But yeah, they're doing all right. They're still trying to. I mean, shows you how well they're doing, and that they're still trying to catch up.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
even with all the extra machinery and everything else. I don't know. I don't know where they stand now with their other shift patterns in the warehouses, if they're up and running yet or anything like that. Who knows? I haven't looked through the thing, but looks like they're doing all right.
Yeah. I think there's some challenges there, but there's challenges that every company's facing everywhere. So, particularly ones who are involved in shipping product, physical product in places, rather than something else. So, yeah, it was an interesting read. As I do get a friend of mine every time he's got a subscription to the Times, I think it is.
Right.
Every time there's a report, they always cover GW. Really interesting. She's got
Oh,
these.
they have got. Yeah, they're talking about GW stocks for a long time. Have been kind of on those programs.
Yeah, they hold it up as a metric. It was really interesting.
They do. Yeah, I can bet, especially now with what's going on. Yeah, and it's also interesting, bearing in mind that they're doing things like I know it's only small numbers because of the event, but the tickets, they're expanding the ways to get invites to the grand final of the GTs they're running. Like London GT's been pulled in, which is an interesting one because London GT and Games Workshop haven't always had the best relationship for quite valid reasons.
Yeah.
But recognizing the size of the event as anything. And that's going along with the events that they're running themselves in the US, as well as Adepticon and Nova and what have you. So they're expanding that a bit on the 40k side of things and the Age of Sigmar side of things, at least anyway. And we were talking just before we came on air before we started recording. We get a red light on this room. We did talk about that, getting a red light on the outside for recording live.
It sends a very different message, though, doesn't it? Really?
It does, yeah. But, it's fine. Neighbours won't mind. About how we've had no events, like no big events. We've had gaming events in the US, and we've had what have GW run over here. They've run gaming events in Warhammer World with a reduced capacity. They've just released
some little heresy thing, didn't they? Some little thing where they invited some people down.
Too, yeah. We've got the tickets have just gone up for the heresy next heresy event they're running, which sold out immediately, in part because they gave away a load of free tickets to people who were inconvenienced by the first one when they said it was going to be first edition rules, which was a silly mistake to make, or more likely a lack of communication between two departments. And then they've just done, so we've got the first Golden Demon over here in 3 years, which is being held at Warhammer World.
I'm slightly surprised I'm surprised that I'm not. Maybe that's disappointing.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I'm slightly surprised that they're holding it.
I'm not shocked.
Yeah, not shocked because they've done all the events there, and I can see they want control over those events, particularly at the moment. And you do that obviously best in your own facility, but particularly that I thought, I don't know. Golden Demon seems to have quite a bit of momentum behind it. With the international ones, and I mean, people are travelling for it, people are excited by them.
Yeah.
You still sort of think, is it going to sell out 800 tickets, that sort of thing? Is it going to be that sort of size of thing?
I don't know. I can't remember the size allowed in.
It's about 400.
About 450. I thought it went to about 600 if they opened up the other part.
That
Maybe
could
I'm
be.
wrong. But it's 450 to 600, somewhere in that ballpark, which isn't
Probably
a
depends
huge
what
amount of
mode
people.
they run it in as well. If they're running it with tables set up, then not so much. Like
Yeah, they
games
might be able
tables.
to reduce. Yeah, if they reduce the amount that they added on to the event things like the conversion table,
Mm,
where it's like if I think of gold, like think of the people who really want to go to
yeah,
Golden Demon
yeah.
as a competitive level, and should they be the only people that this is aimed at? Possibly not. But when you've got reduced ticket numbers,
Mm,
right, having a casual coming along because there's also these other things, and I want to see Golden Demon. It's an awkward one because then if Richard Gray misses out and Andy Wardle misses out, and you got a list of names like 15 long
mm,
of previous Golden Demon winners who miss out, and then 3 or 4 get in. Okay, that means other people have got a chance to enter, but is the competition reduced
mm.
because of that? Will this one have a little asterisk by it?
Yeah.
A little bit like when they did the mini demons, heresy weekenders, and those ones. And I think for people who win Slayer Swords, who are in that community already, it possibly will.
But
Um,
it's interesting, isn't it? That this has become a conversation now. They have it, whereas at events before that, it wasn't really a you could get at a Warhammer Fest or a Games Day before it. Not really a conversation because I don't think they were
no,
sold
those,
out, or if they did, the capacity was such that people who
yeah,
really wanted to go were definitely going. That wasn't going to be an issue. Availability of tickets wasn't a conversation. It certainly
no,
is now
no.
with a number of these things, and particularly with this Golden Demon.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I wonder how many people are going to be going up. There's someone who lives down near me, and she goes up to Warhammer World semi-regularly from just following Instagram, and loves to be in and around those kind of things. Doesn't appear to be, and someone who would probably go to something like this. I'm projecting. Take person X, whatever they like going up Warhammer World. They like the trip up the weekend. Oh, there's a Golden Demon on that weekend. I'll go that weekend, get to see some really good models. Don't really bother about entering myself.
Hmm.
Like, you get that weird dynamic. Um, yeah, and I don't know. Who knows?
It's going to make it an interesting event.
Hopefully,
One
I mean,
hopes that next year, as we were talking about before, one hopes that realistically, as we get into next year, I think the back end of this year
I
is going to
think
be unlikely to see much
if
of a change of format. But
um,
next year, I'm hopeful we
if
might
they're
see
not
some
going to do it
bigger
next year,
events.
when are they going to do it? Like, for whatever position we are in with COVID, and I know um, there's still risks out there and everything like that. I'm not a doctor. I don't know all of it, but at some point, it appears like we have to accept a normal for
Mm,
whatever value that is, rightly or wrongly. Um, GW want to put on Warhammer Fest, and people want to go to Warhammer Fest, and weekenders and open days and what have you. And I think if you don't do it next year, what are you waiting for?
mm.
Because I'm not sure we're going to get to a situation that's much better than that.
No, I would have thought
Um,
next year seems like
in
it
my
feels like
top
you
medical
left
head.
it 2022 to almost sort of shake down a bit. 23 would feel like the right year to go back into events at scale
Yeah,
where you take the risk of holding it
that's
in a bigger venue where you have an outlay where you're probably having to pay a substantial down payment on a renting a big location, and I would
yeah. And
hope
there's an
we'll see it
argument.
this year.
There's probably a little element of possibility of like, oh, what happens if it does come back this year?
Mm,
And we have seen numbers rise, but we haven't seen necessarily the level of danger of those numbers.
mm,
Obviously, there are outliers. There always will be. This thing's never going to leave us now. It is what it is. It's something we have to learn to adapt to. And if people want to come and wear masks, for their own protection and what have you, then fair play. They do it in other countries. Maybe that becomes more of a norm. But I think we have to start pushing forwards, and they will as well. Um, but yeah, we shall see. It will be good to have a Warhammer Fest to go to next year. Right. Well, what have we had from this is still weird getting used to. Oh, GW and Forge World have released loads of stuff.
Yeah,
This is not
and
normal.
it's quite a bit as well. Yeah,
Um,
just another Sunday comes up with, there's another haul of stuff. Yeah,
Indeed.
there's things I'm really looking forward to. These things didn't come
Mm,
immediately, but there's some kits we've still got to come that we know are coming, which is great that we kind of know they're on the horizon as well. Um,
indeed.
but yeah, there's been a fair bit, hasn't there?
I'll start here and work backwards because it's open. EPUBs for the Hereticus and Astartes books.
Yes,
Oh, so
a
a
lot of
little bit
people
of
looking forward
gnashing
to
of
that.
yeah, gnashing of teeth from some people that these weren't announced, that they were coming beforehand. I wonder if they weren't planned to
I
come.
wonder. I wonder if they saw demand and said, "Okay,
Well, I wonder if they saw how many people have got PDFs on their phones already.
yeah, fair point."
I
Yeah,
wonder if it's a response. It might not be, but I'm glad they've got it. I will have. There's quite you can find these books even cheaper online now as people sell them to get the ebooks.
mm.
I'm going to have both. I think.
Oh,
Um,
it's so. I mean, I say that I still like having a physical book in
yeah.
a game, and until you have to carry it somewhere, and then
Well, yeah, there is that. I mean, my biggest problem with these books and the rule book is where some of the rules are.
mm,
They don't seem to be in a logical place in the book for
mm,
my brain, and I'm not the only one who thinks like that. I know. Trying to find the rule sections, specific rules parts, and we've said it before. Not
mm.
just where rules are in those rules, but actually where in the book those sections are. Don't always seem straightforward. So that hopefully will help with that.
It will make them searchable. You could bookmark them as well on your tablet,
Yeah,
things like that. It's quite handy.
absolutely, for sure. And they've shown us what have we had now? We've had the Emperor's Children and the White Scars upgrade kits.
Imperial,
Um,
Iron
Iron
Warriors,
Warriors. Yeah, so we're waiting for the Space Wars if they're going in Legion order now.
yes.
Well, we're up to there. We've got the release of the Dark Angels ones coming, so that kind of shows you a rough time scale that we might be looking at with these. Again, so much stuff going on that can change all that. Marduk Cedras is now available, so if someone went and bought him for 60 quid on eBay, more for you for getting him a few weeks early, in my opinion. But hey, spend your money how you want. These things become available. It's very rare that they're not, or they're labelled very clearly as such.
This is a
In
very nice
advance.
model. It is a very
It
nice
is a nice model. Yeah, the funky sword is cool. I quite like it. I know some people don't, but this is Warhammer. It's
model.
exactly the kind of sword that fits in Warhammer. We got the Emperor's Children Praetor.
Oh yes,
What
yes.
do you think of that?
I'm a fan. I'm a fan. And it also bodes well that they go back and sort of fill those in for those legions that didn't have
Oh
them.
yeah,
And I'm quite excited to see what they do with others there as well. But I thought that one, I particularly liked that one. I thought it was cool. I liked seeing him in the Mark 6. I think that was nice. I think there's from the silhouette of the model in particular. Big fan of the big cape. It's nicely over the top. But the silhouette of the model being similar, there have been parallels drawn with the Emperor's Children, one of the earliest Emperor's Children
mm.
metal sculpts they did. Probably 30 years ago now. There's a few nods to it in the detailing, and I thought, yeah, this is cool. I like that. I like the alternative head. I think it's cool that you got options like that. I think he's very Emperor's Children. I think it's the right level of filigree and detail like that. Nice paint job,
That head is freaky, man.
and perfect for it.
Yeah, proper freaky. Is it the Raptor Imperialis? The Raptor with the single Raptor with the wing on
What
his left
the one on
shoulder?
his portrait? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's nice. That's
possibly
really well done.
unusual with
I can't remember.
the jewels set into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone has to do freehand of the Aquila on the cloak as well.
That's molded.
Is that molded? Is it?
It's
Is that
molded. Look
actually
at
molded?
the.
Oh, it might be.
There's
Yeah.
an image of the
Yes,
cloak.
right at the bottom you can see
Yeah,
it's raised. Oh yes. Oh well, in that case, that's awesome. I like that
What do you think
for
about the spear?
people like me. Um, that's funky. I like it. It's a bit
I love
different.
the detail on the spear. The blade is a bit strange for me, but very Slaneshy. So it's cool.
It's got a half axe blade, isn't it? It's weird. It
Yeah,
can be
it's
used almost like a
curious.
halberd. It can be used two ways.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what sort of it's where the other spears that they've got. I'd love to see it in person. Really, I do love the bright silver shoulder pad. I think that's awesome. That's a colour scheme.
yeah, no, they've done really well with that. Really
And
well, yeah. And
this
there's
guy
there's
sat with the Palatine blades. Would look really
mm, there's quite a few little holes in that. We've talked about it before. Holes in that Praetor line.
cool.
Um, yeah, and I think it was fairly obvious from a while ago they were going back and
Yes.
filling in a little bit. So that's good to see. They also showed us a Predator because
Yes.
because the video got leaked by someone in China accidentally pressing the wrong button,
Yeah.
putting the wrong video up. But that's here coming. It looks funky. It looks cool.
There
It's
was a heresy, a bit of a surprise heresy, at least, albeit not the 28mm scale one. The Aeronautica Imperialis Horus
yeah, I
Heresy.
was going to get onto that. That was an interesting. I mean, the beauty of this is it's a reprinting mainly, isn't it? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they made rules for all 18 legions. Um, I can't imagine they're extensive rules.
No, it's going to be a bit of war gear,
But
maybe
yeah,
a
a bit of
print
flavour.
type of thing. We've got some cool
Yeah,
colour plates though.
exactly. Which
Big fan of the Alpha Legion one in particular.
yeah, so funky and cool. If you want to, for some people, I mean, it's easy for them, isn't it, to make a book like this? Relatively easy, and to put it out, and then hopefully
As the
maybe you're
models, exactly, as the models were already
yeah,
there, but it was interesting the impact it had when I was just generally seeing the reaction to it, which I thought was very positive. Not everyone gets on with the game particularly well. I think it's perfectly straightforward and it's fine. But the models are just so good, and it was the perfect excuse. I thought people were using that as a brilliant excuse to be like, well, clearly I now need to get a pack of these cool little Xiphon
well, this is it, right? So
Stormy and the Thunderhawk, and we all in.
common issue with the Adeptus Titanicus and any rumours of a Horus Heresy um, epic setting hasn't got enough. Like, who I don't want to play just two factions. I want Eldar. I want this. I want that. If this book sells in big numbers, it kind of backs up a restricted opening set of miniatures
Mm.
in a setting that they know is going to sell. Like, and I'm not saying that will happen, but if it does, that does show you why Adeptus Titanicus was done that way.
Mm-hmm.
There's less risk when you're only making a handful of figures that can then be used by everyone, pretty much.
Yeah.
Rather than having to try and make 4 or 5 different, completely different ranges to be used. So it will be interesting to see that. As I quite like Aeronautica Imperialis. It's not very deep. It's a bit crazy, but it's good fun, and so you need
I
to
can
play it
see
in
why
that way.
people have criticisms of it, but it is equally. I know people who enjoy it for the very reason that other people have criticised it. It's sort of overly simplistic. It's too easy to move around. It goes over. It plays a bit too quickly for some people. They would like a bit more depth. Others I know are like, yep, great. I can just chuck these planes down, moving around, have some fun.
Yeah,
It's great.
I think it's really
Highly
dangerous with aircraft games like the old Aeronautica Imperialis was detailed, and you can end up with whole turns of nothing happening because you get it slightly wrong in how you move your planes, and then you're like, oh, okay, 3 turns, nothing's happened. Cool. Which I think you're better off going this way than that way.
Yes.
Happy medium somewhere, maybe. But yeah, it's a light, fun game. Cool. And I say it's an easy win for them, isn't it? There's a cool Space Wolf on the cover as well.
Who
Ways.
appears to have blown the wing off an Iron Warrior? Yes, an Iron Warrior's Fire Raptor.
Dirty Iron Warriors.
Well, it's weird because there appears to be. Yeah, it must be Iron Warriors. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Because there's the Hazard Stripes and the big giant 4 on it, of course. Very cool.
Yeah, it's all good. And then what else have we had? There's been plenty.
Yeah,
So,
we
let's do this one. Let's get this one out of the way. Garrow, Knight of the Grey.
oh, I was just thinking that one. Yep.
So, we thought there might be, but we didn't know if there were going to be any more books to come on the side of the Siege of Terror. But we're getting Garrow's final story, which timeline will be interesting to see how it fits in and how the story goes.
Well,
There's no point getting too ahead of yourself.
it's said to be before Warhawk.
Yeah, but that's interesting within itself.
Yeah, indeed.
So yeah,
when this book is coming.
Yeah, which I don't have a problem with that. These are side stories. These can be read
Yeah.
in and around the main story, and obviously, bearing in mind it's Garrow and Mortarion. He's not going to end up killing Mortarion because Mortarion's there for. So but it'll be interesting to see how Garrow's heresy story ends. And yeah,
Well, if indeed it does, I would assume it does because it's Jim. I'm also cool to see Jim Swallow getting another go at it, as he obviously has been written so many. Was there at the sort of the early days and has had.
Garrow's his boy in it.
Yeah, exactly. So it kind of makes sense that he gets at least something in the Siege of Terror series.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm looking forward to that. And it can't be long till we get Aaron's book out.
No.
So we've now got that.
It's going to be September, isn't it? It's going to be.
Yeah, we've got Aaron's book. We know this one, and we know the last book. They've all been announced within the last month and a bit. Well, the other two have been announced in the last month and a bit. So yeah, we're pushing on. I'm making sure that whatever I'm reading, as soon as Echoes of Eternity is released, it's top of the reading queue no matter what's on there.
Has to be.
Yeah, I've got there's a Jim Butcher Dresden short just come out that I need to put on the list. I've almost finished Mortarion's Primarch novel. I just haven't been even taking breaks at work to read, and if I have I've been sleeping. So, yeah, trying to get on that track. I started rereading the Lord of the Rings trilogy last year. Yeah, and I finished the first book just before baby was born, and I haven't got any further.
Fair.
So yeah,
it's been some things to go through.
Yeah,
A few things holding
no time. No time. But
so there was Garrow, Siege.
Garrow.
We've had the with Kabanda came out.
Yes, Kabanda. So we haven't got any demon rules yet, still, but we have got Kabanda's rule. He's a bit of a beast. We are looking at what we're looking at. Weapon skill 8, strength 8, toughness 8, 8 wounds, 7 attacks, 3 up save. 3 up save is a bit interesting. But he's got 4 up invulnerable, 3 up adamantium will. It will not die, 5 up. Yeah, he's got a lot going on. Demonic wings as well for when he wants to use them, obviously. Hammer of Wrath D3. The toughness 8 is going to help. Plus, if the demon rule is still the same, so toughness 9, first 2 turns. And he must be a Crimson Fury, Etheric Dominion, so we're keeping that aspect of things, which was reasonable expectation, but it's there. They get plus D3 to the number of wounds caused for purposes of resolving which side has won combat, and every unit within 6 inches of him as well, which is not that bad, and an extra reaction in the movement phase. Invulnerable, so 4 up, yeah. Strength, user plus 4 melee weapon, two-handed with Sunder, so strength 12, 13, 12, 11 over the course of the turn, so AP2. That's not bad with Sunder to reroll. Movement characteristic goes to 14 if he uses his wings. Not bad.
Which is pretty significant these days.
Yeah, absolutely. He hates Sanguinius.
It's not entirely. That's entirely fair.
No, yeah. He's got, what has he got?
He gets that special secondary objectives, doesn't he? Yeah, where they square off against each
Yeah,
other.
I'm just looking at Miasma of Rage. Increase the rage value of any models and any models within 12 are increased by 1. So if you've got Rampage D3, so Rage and Rampage. So if you've got D3 Rampage, it'll be D3 plus 1. That's not bad. Note that this rule affects the Rampage D3 granted by Crimson Fury Etheric Dominion. So Rampage is going to be on everything, basically, in the Crimson Fury list. Not bad. And then he's still got his special Scythe of Hatred attack. So this was, I don't know if this was called this last time. You do it after the results of any combats have been worked out and sweeping advances and consolidations have been completed. You get to place a Hellstorm template with a narrow end, so that's big, a narrow end in contact with Commander's base. Any unit with models underneath suffer a number of automatic strength hits, AP- hits equal to the number of unsaved wounds caused by the melee attacks made by Commander during the previous assault phase. So he's got 7 attacks.
Template is the really
big flame
Apocalypse Flamer, isn't it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I didn't know they were still available.
7 attacks plus your Rampage plus 1. At weapon skill 8, at strength 8. Just as long as he's not challenged out, that's a lot of extra saves to make at strength 6. Yeah. And this is the kind of thing where, okay, you can take off models where you want now as controlling player, but this was the thing that screwed me in the last game when I played him, was that after combat he then killed 3 models and broke himself out of combat. All I wanted to do was hold him in the combat, and he killed over 3 inches worth of stuff, and all of a sudden we're not locked in combat anymore. But yeah, he looks quite beefy, and in the article he smashed Sanguinius to bits as well. It's cool.
This is heavy. Yeah, he's a significant thing.
Mine sat on my desk.
Yeah, I was going to say quite the modelling project.
So GW sent me one, which I was going to get painted up, and then that didn't happen. But my mate did build it, and it is considerable in size. So he's almost the same height as a Mega Gargant before the wings. Oh no, that's not Carband. That's the other one. That's the other model. He's in my. So I would get him out, but he's in my cupboard. He barely fits in my display cabinet because of his wings. So yeah, he's just shy in height of a Mega Gargant. I had my friend try and bend those wings a bit. When we had the article, did you see Liam Paint Stuffs? Yeah, he did a really good job on that wing. But this is like it's about a foot wide. Foot square, that thing, and he just fits in because his wings are there, and his whip is something special. It's going to be fun to paint. Yeah.
It's a hell of a kit. It is a real centerpiece kit. It's nice.
And it's not cheap, but I could have seen it being more.
Yes.
I was like, reasonable.
When one's expectations are that high, and you see it come out as that, okay, yeah, right.
I love it. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
The helmeted head surprised me.
So yeah, I like the idea of it, and I like test fitted it on just with the head and that, and it does look added on, in my opinion. I think that shows in the photos as well. I
prefer the bare head, but it's interesting that they gave it as an option.
Yeah, no, it's certainly good to see. But I'm trying to remember who did the one where they stuck it on. Who was it? It was. I gotta find it now.
That's the one at the bottom.
He wrote there.
Chris Long.
Right. Yeah. I can't think of any way that I'd see that and not think it's just added on a little bit. Also, his face is really cool.
You would have quite, yeah.
So I think you do miss. I think had it been a proper helm or something, then maybe that would have been better. But yeah, it's a bonus option you don't have to put on, so it's like fantastic. Yeah, it's never an issue. What else did we have? We had the Leviathan released, the combat
Yes,
Leviathan. Have you
still
started
surprised
putting
that that
together?
came with us. I've opened the box.
Yeah, GW sent us one of them. I sent it on to Howard, but we just haven't. It was quite a short notice, and life just not letting that
I
happen
say
at the
that
moment.
I've opened it up and I've started planning. I want to build this thing because it looks. I really want to get into what the magnetizing options are. And it looks like it's
Right.
going to be quite straightforward. Actually, it's not as straightforward as the Contemptor, but I think
There's a
it's the
few
weapons are
people who,
going to be interchangeable with the resin ones. It's going to
yeah, there's a
should be
few
fine.
people who've done videos. My my issue. So I'm going to buy a combat one. So I've got the arms.
Hmm.
I'm tempted to make a gun one with storm cannons
Mm-hmm.
because the grav arm was never a great option with the old one. Seems hard push to put a grav arm on one of these, but the melter has potential. So
Mm.
I'm thinking maybe I make a full shooty one and then a snippy claw
Mm.
melter dude. Um, I don't think Leviathans are quite what they were in the old game,
I
purely
don't think it's a
because
bad thing.
no, I think mainly because the Contemptor's so good.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Like the extra you're paying for the Leviathan um, isn't a straightforward upgrade on the Contemptor.
No, it's a
So
different thing, particularly as it's got
yeah,
heavy. If I remember correctly, it can't run.
yeah. So I
I think.
quite like the idea of a bit of Volkite and some storm cannons
Mm.
just plinking because there's a lot of decent shots with some rend. So
I think
you
the
know,
Storm Cannon's the smart choice. I think it looks cool
yeah.
as well. I think it
But
looks something really cool as a gun platform like that.
yeah, normally, you know what, I might like with the melter claw. I think that's always going to be a possibility to use.
Mm.
I think once you start building a shooting one, now the problem with this game that we don't know is how often we're going to get updates, FAQs, errata.
Mm.
So when it becomes clear that no one takes X gun for whatever, are they going to address that?
Mm.
And then if they address that, do I then want to change the gun options to mix things up? So I think magnetizing on these, where before I'd be like, I think I'll just buy another Contemptor and have two. Like I don't care. Particularly in the plastics, like my first thoughts was just buy another one, like because
Mm.
there's loads out there on eBay,
Mm.
stuff like that. But you could easily end up at a point where the weapons change to not to have rules that you don't want to use them for,
Mm.
not necessarily for being the best or the worst, but for not fitting the role or something like that.
I think
So I
that
think
it's still
that's
something nice about being able to just. I just quite enjoy the changing the weapons in and out like that. I think that's quite good fun.
I'm just the laziest hobbyist. I'm just
But
like,
particularly cool that they did come out with we're going to be releasing the weapons options. Kind of expected,
yeah,
but
surprised, and
not guaranteed by any stretch.
the price was good as well.
Mm. Mm.
I think I saw someone kind of complaining about the price. I'm like, they're saving you from buying a whole kit.
And
Right.
compare it to the resin ones.
Well, yeah, but so say you do only want the one Leviathan and you've got your mind made up and you only want one arm, you have to pay 15 quid. Well, you sell the other arm to someone else. You split it, £7.50 each.
Mm.
All of a sudden, you're buying a plastic Leviathan and a £7.50 arm. And if you are, I mean, if you are at that point where you are like, I just want this gun and this arm, well, you can sell the other weapons as well.
Mm.
Like, okay, you might need the arm for it or what have you, but lots of people want the bits
Mm.
for various things.
Definitely.
So, yeah, I just don't really see it. Bearing in mind, I also think it's weird at the moment where hobbyists are looking at price rises, and GW haven't raised their prices a huge amount over the last 3 years. We did have a price rise with Forge World, but when you look around the rest of the world over the last 2 years at the price rises,
Mm.
whether it's just fuel, whether it's building materials, or at
Crisis.
work we've just had constant price adjustments for, I say, for a year and a half now. I don't think GW's done that badly, really.
No. Well, particularly as we said with those logistical things, that they're just taking
Yeah.
on the chin. They said they would. I'm sure it will come in time, but then
Yeah, I mean, things have creeped up.
Across every sector, people have just said, "Sorry, we're going to increase this," and
Mm.
it's just out of nowhere, and they're like orders of magnitude increases as well. They haven't had to do that yet.
No, I think they've done well. Yeah, the worry is that they do eventually go up when other prices aren't going up, and they get grief for it. But
Yeah,
because people then forget that they've not gone up that much over the last few years.
but like you say, the Leviathan,
I mean,
quite good value, I think, overall, and as
yeah,
are the kits that have been coming out in general for
yeah,
heresy.
I think so. Haven't bought too much because I'm still, finding any time to hobby. It's pretty hard.
Particularly the last few
Yeah,
weeks, I think, for some
yeah,
reason.
exactly. But
There
yeah,
was
no,
quite a few options coming with the Predator, but it looks like the Predator, the Contemptor, and the Leviathan are all going to follow the same principle. That there's going to probably be two
makes
versions of
sense,
the
doesn't it?
kits. Yeah, absolutely.
And this is the thing, right? Like in an ideal world, yeah, you could order the Predator you want with the exact loadout you want, and it would be exactly the same price. It's just unrealistic.
Hmm.
A Games Workshop are out there, and they want to make money because they're a company, so they want to sell you things. But if they, and because of the range of options they give you, because you can adjust your models. Now, if they gave you everything, a Predator was this, and that was it, you can't upgrade it or anything like that. That would be disappointing. That would be more disappointing than having to choose which one of two kits to get stuff.
Hmm. No,
You
I'm
know,
all for it, particularly when they're chucking in extra weapon options that we haven't had before. I'm just surprised they're doing it. It's great that they are, but you think, well, they'd almost be trying to limit the number of product codes, which I think has been a thing in the past, where they're like, this range is almost too big now. We need to think this through because it's things they have to stock and do whatever else. And you think that's quite a lot, but good on them, all for it, rather than particularly when they're releasing weapon sprues separately.
yeah, yeah. That's hey, we
I
could all
think
be
that's it, isn't it? We've
yeah,
got the Iron
pretty
Warriors
much.
heads.
Iron Warriors heads, yeah. Well, we did have some more exemplary battles.
We did.
So
We've had the
uh,
where was it? What was the name of the
there's
battle?
been quite. So they have the Battle of Trisolian,
Yes.
the story of the Vengeful Spirit from the book, which has given us Jorland Hunter packs and Chieftain squads. So the Jordan Hunter pack representing the units that went onto the Vengeful Spirit, which are essentially their troops with hand flamers. Where are we? So yeah, basic troops, 125 points for 5 of them, coming with a hand flamer, chainsaw, frag grenades, crack grenades, power armor, scout. They're a support squad, crusader, and they're Space Wolves, obviously, so they get the Legion of Starry Space Wolf stuff. They get Scour and Tempest. Once per battle during the shooting phase, one of their turns, the active player control power of a unit made up entirely of models may choose to activate Scour and Tempest. Till the end of the phase, all flame weapons in the unit gain pinning and torrent 3-inch special rules. Now, this unit just feels a bit expensive. 125 points for 5 with torrent 3 inches means that you need to be 11 inches away from the enemy to even just touch them. Pinning, yeah, fine, cool. 5 models, like you're just dead afterwards because they're just dudes. Like, yeah, what can they have? They have a Frostblade on the Huntmaster, Artificer Armor, Melt Bombs. Yeah, you could give the Huntmaster Melt Bombs. And
What's
then
the maximum unit size?
It's 10 additional, 15. But at that point, 15 points each, you're adding on, a lot of points. 225 points. 10 additional hunters is 150, yeah. So 275 just to be 15 dudes with hand flamers. And in fact, they don't have another pistol. It's just hand flamers and chainswords. They're just whatever they're called, a despoiler squad now, aren't they? Like with Crusader and Scout. Yeah, I mean,
Scout's quite heavy.
Yeah, it fits a different role, but there's nothing to write home about.
Hmm.
Um, the one place you might be useful is Zone Mortalis, which might be argued they're designed for that
Hmm.
because this whole thing was about going through, the vengeful spirit. I was going to have every 5 models, one may exchange a hand flamer for a flamer, or Vulcanite Serpentess, so you can have 3 flamers in there. Yeah, I just, they're cool, whatever. I don't think you're going to see many people making them. It's one of those things. I think if you're a completionist in the,
Yeah,
you've got the
I
huge
can see
legion, you
that.
make them. If not, I'd be surprised if we see too many. The Chieftain squad is an HQ squad, so at
I
least
think
the
this
Hunter
is
pack was a troop
a
support
cool
squad.
little
Yeah,
squad. This, I think this is a nice little. I mean, the artwork, the model photos they did, I thought were particularly nice. I can see these capturing particularly as there's quite an upsurge in the number of people collecting Sons of Horus. I could see this being a thing.
definitely. So these are an HQ selection, um, 4 chieftains and a standard bearer. Bane strike bolters. They got Legion standard because the bolt pistol, chainsword, power armor, boarding shields. They are chosen warriors, chieftain retinue, kingslayers, relentless. All good rules there. 125. They got 2 wounds, 2 attacks each. Weapon skill 5. Only 3 up armor save. But you can take the artificial armor. You can have 5 more at 20 points each. So 225 for 10. Not bad. They can have chain axes, power weapons, and power fists across the whole unit. I mean, that's one thing with the Space Wolves unit. If you take the Slayer and Stalker packs, there's so many options as well.
Mm.
Like they are in a space and that are competing for something that can score as well. But yeah, the Chieftain squad. So uh, so you can have these as a retinue squad for a Master of the Legion in a Sons of Horus army, if you wish. Uh,
2 wounds, weapon skill 5. It's pretty good.
yeah, I think that's not far off the retinue squad anyway.
Mm.
Uh, but I like the fact you could take these as just an HQ squad by themselves. Then
Mm.
Kingslayers, if you're attacking an enemy independent character or Primarch, all failed hit rolls of 1 may be re-rolled. When it's engaged in a challenge, is used to make melee attacks. You can re-roll all failed 2 hit rolls against
Mm.
Primarchs or characters. So yeah, I mean decent, and Bane Strike as well. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like these. I think they're pretty
I
cool.
could see them being used more than the Wolves ones. For sure. I haven't had a chance to look at the missions.
No, the only one I got into was the previous Exemplary Battles one, which was as I read a review of that one as well. It wasn't the best mission, to say the least. There was some definite challenges with the way it was set up and the way it was described in the previous one, the Battle of Gildan Star,
Right.
or Scouring, I should say, the Scouring of Gildan Star, which had the Word Bearers kind of apothecary squad. I think that's all they had in there. Yes, there was only the one unit in there, but yeah, the mission in there wasn't. It takes some work to make it actually work as a mission.
Right.
Problems
I
with
mean,
predicting things.
these are all pretty much they're very narrative
Yes,
anyway.
this one
So
very much
there's an
had to be.
element of approaching it
Yeah,
in that respect.
you'd need to in that one's case, whereas others have been more clear cut. I forget who it was who reviewed it, and I will find that out and mention it. But it was, yeah, there were some definite issues with that one. The Word Bearers unit, though, it's quite characterful to say the least. They're a pretty dark unit out there with the good guys collecting gene seed and desecrating it to
Yes.
summon all sorts of nasties. I thought that's pretty cool, pretty vicious.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I say, I always say every time. It'd be interesting to see how long these continue.
Well, they did say they're coming to the end of this. They may extend it, but they said they're sort of coming to the end because it sounds like they want to cover each legion
These Legion, yeah,
and
there's
give
still a
them
few
eight
to go,
units. And
isn't
we've
there?
only got what have we got left? Blood Angels, Thousand Suns. Even God, we've got one. Iron Hands.
Right.
Is that it?
There's a few.
Salamanders. There's about 4 left, I think. So in theory, it could be as few as 2 more of these. But I've got a feeling that if they've been popular or they've got the ideas, I could see them just doing the odd 1 or 2, not necessarily with units, but cool battles and things, because they seem to have gone down pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, we could also have like non-marine
Mm.
runs of these potentially moving forwards. Just nice to leave it open. If they have an idea, they can throw it out there. We don't, we're still waiting for the Mechanicum book and all those books as well to come out. So we don't know how, once things have settled down in that respect, like what the release schedule is going to be like, how we're going to get those releases either. So a nice drop of something that they've got, that might have then appeared down the line would be a decent way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll have to wait and see, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, lots going on, which is cool, and more to come.
Because what we've got coming up, what's on the horizon? We've got quite a lot of models on the way. We've got Mechanicum next month.
Yep.
Possibly. If it's really on the roadmap is if it's
we got basically something a month, haven't we? Every month. We know we're getting the Mechanicum, we know we're getting that other Imperial book, or whatever it's called.
Is it Agents of the Emperor?
Yes, something like that. So lots of stuff to come, and beyond that, I'm sure plenty more to come with that as well. And they'll keep throwing stuff out. We've got, so there's 18 Legion upgrades to go through. We've had Sons of Horus Dawn, when we had Dark Angels, Emperor's Children, Iron Warriors, and White Scars. We've had 6 of those revealed. So there's another 12 reveals of those to go that will be died through. And it's obvious they want. It's one that no system is ever perfect, but GW want to have continual sales of stuff. They want to keep you going back to their website. They want to keep you ordering, constantly ordering. So yeah, we are going to get a week where they show us Space Wolf upgrades. Like, chill, don't worry about it. It's good. Doesn't mean everything's coming to a halt. Doesn't mean that the Leviathan isn't ever going to make it. People are still asking about the Spartan. They're still selling loads of the Land Raider. It will come at some point. It's frustrating, but that's, just cool. You just got to roll with it. There's a lot of stuff, and if they dump it all on you tomorrow, and went, here's 17 releases, and then went quiet for 3 months, people would soon be annoyed.
Yeah.
Not to mention, logistics of getting that all made and all out and everything else. There's a lot going on there, so just roll with it. And for slow painters like me, it means there's a vague hope that you might get stuff done before the next thing's released. It's a false hope. It's a false dawn, but it's there. But yeah, I think we've probably handled all that, haven't we?
Well, it seems. It's quite a lot, isn't it? As you said, I think that covers everything.
As usual, we talk for a while. We normally do. It's almost that's part of the monthly thing. There's just all the chat, all the chat.
All the chat, all the time.
Indeed. Shall we? We'll pause that there, and we'll come back in a bit. Okie dokie. So, Howard, you wanted to talk about some stuff for this part of the show.
Well, yeah. I've had some interesting conversations over the last month, and it's sort of, I'd imagine we all have. I imagine we've all had a few more conversations with people, perhaps, who are returning to the hobby perhaps are interested in the game that weren't before, or even just people who are starting up something new. I mean, it's kind of an obvious thing that people might start up with that, but I've been quite surprised at how much there has been an uptake of people starting up either with a new force or getting into the game. Particularly people, there's friends of mine who were pretty diehard. I play this game and I don't want to play any other games because it'll be too tempting for me to do so, and then get sucked into it and have to go big. Um, and it has won people over. The Age of Darkness box set, the whole all the coverage of the game, the way people have been talking about it, it's had quite a bit of momentum behind it, and particularly if you're across a range of different channels, let's say. So if you're across a range of different social media things, but specifically I'm thinking of YouTube, but really whatever form you take, if you follow on Twitter or Instagram, there's people posting where they're exploring little things and trying little things. This is both people who traditionally create a lot of things and talk about it and post about it, but also people who are experimenting with a few things. And as a result, it was a very interesting range of discussion, particularly to someone who had played back in second edition, who'd perhaps been reading various books, was generally aware from searching around on the internet what had been happening on the storyline, but had been out of the hobby, from the hobby side of things, for 20 years or more in some cases. Had this conversation with a guy, and it was really interesting to have to almost, in explaining it to him, having to review my own perception of it, of the state of the hobby, almost, if you like, and describing that to someone who had only known it back when you had the little postage stamp sized fold out thing where you could order your kind of your blood angels red, goblin
Yeah.
green, and whatever it was in a paintbrush for a couple of quid. Or the glory days of Humbrol paints and not much else. When you then describe to someone the state of the hobby and what we're presented with, I mean, we were just talking about plastic kits, for example, just being able to describe to someone what that was, and I was extending that out into what Titanicus was, Aeronautica, etc. It's an interesting conversation to say, well, where are we right now when you're confronted with, because I had that conversation with one person, and then another friend of mine has picked up an Age of Darkness box because he thought it's just such good value. Even as a self-contained thing, it also represents quite a cool force, and I'm seeing quite a lot of people putting lists together with that as the core, unsurprisingly. When someone is confronted with, okay, I want to now have some fun painting this, modelling and painting this, we have so many options. And it would just seem to be a real interesting point in the hobby, where there's not only is there a range of materials and resources out there, but there are those guides out there so that you can experiment with those, or rather you could invest in those with a greater degree of certainty than you might have done in any time recently. And you think of just the new contrast paints that have come along and seeing what people are doing with that. Painting yellow, as an example, is now probably more straightforward and less irritating and frustrating than it has been in years. And that's before you start getting into some of the more perhaps tricky paint schemes. I mean, seeing Darren Latham put out a really good paint scheme for Sons of Horus using the contrast paint, which is perhaps even some people who've experimented with that and found it tricky to get a smooth coverage. He gave a really good demonstration of that. I think it's an interesting discussion to see where we are now and how you might launch into it, either as a new hobbyist or a hobbyist coming back, or even starting up a new force. I'm starting up a new force with this. I'm going to be trying some Alpha Legion. This really interesting range of paint schemes and colour schemes, trying to get that colour to be just what I want it to be. We're in a brilliant place. I would encourage anyone to go out there and just explore whichever channel they enjoy, be it a YouTube source or an Instagram or a Facebook. There have been Facebook groups. There's a sizable Facebook group for every legion, with people posting 2 or 3 things every day. It's just interesting to see, where do you dive in. Have you found the same thing? Have you found that you've seen that kind of momentum behind it?
Yeah, I think I almost wonder if I was new, where would I dive in?
Hmm.
Like it's almost too. There's almost too many options.
There is. Yeah, you can almost have this information overload.
Yeah, it definitely is hard to work out where to go, and then and how you fit in with that as well, which is, it's a much better problem to have than waiting for White Dwarf to hopefully have
Yeah.
whatever painting style you want, which was 4 pictures, which was how to draw an owl, draw a circle, draw another circle, draw
Finish the
two
owl.
circles, finish the owl. You know, um, exactly. Like we are light years away
Yeah.
from that. There are, as you say, YouTube's, there are Patreons, there's people doing it on Facebook, there's
Forgot about
Twitter,
Patreon.
there's um, you know everywhere you go. Then, as I say, if you want to find a Sons of Horus, you'll have 18 different Sons of Horus
Hmm.
videos to choose from.
But that's a great thing. I think that's a
If
great
you
thing
want to
because
do the classic,
you've got the rule book. I still think does a really good job of giving you a little taste of which of all the legions, bit of background, a color plate. You get a flavor. You're probably gonna find your I like these guys if you aren't already coming with that, with a bit of background knowledge or whatever. If you're a hobbyist from back in the day, so you've probably got some legions that you're leaning towards anyway. To then be able to look up in almost whichever method you choose, be it general image search through to a YouTube thing, like you say, you've got various techniques to say, well, actually, I like contrast paint or I like spray paint. I mean, I thought there's a great set of videos out there which are just using rattle cans as a method because not everyone's going to want to take to an airbrush for good reason. I mean, there's plenty of airbrush guides. There's plenty of there's these new rattle can only guides. There's painting with regular hairy brush approach. You're going to be able to choose not only the technique not only a color scheme that you enjoy. You say, yeah, actually, I really want my Imperial Fists to be a really bright, saturated yellow, or do I want them to be a really gritty, mustard yellow, kind of muted colors, heavily weathered? You're going to have guides to all of them. And even within that, you can end up with guides in different techniques and say, actually, I'd prefer to try and achieve that with traditional layer paints, or no, actually, I'm going to try and do that with contrast paints. I think that's very cool that we
I
can suddenly
think,
explore with all those.
yeah, I suppose a lot of new people will just go to Facebook or wherever and just ask the question, where can I find? And I do think there is value in identifying the people who make it easy to follow.
Mm.
Because particularly for people who are newer into painting, it can be daunting to see Richard Gray
Oh, yeah.
painting something. It can even be daunting to see just good people, like good solid paint jobs.
Mm.
It is tricky. Such a weird one. I'm with my Spaceballs. I'm repainting what I had, and I'm trying to figure out how to do it myself. Like what method to go, what to use,
Mm.
because I just as you say, there's a plethora. Um, I don't know. It's hard to. It's also hard for me, I think, to visualize what my painting of that style would be.
Mm.
I think that's something that's easy to forget. Is that I'm looking at Miles painting, Sons of Horus. Cool.
Mm.
Well, that's Miles painting Sons of Horus. you know, and there will be differences for other people doing it. But you're right. There is a whole wide range of options.
But we're in a really particular point, which is a really interesting one, really exciting one, where, as you say, you can look at that. There isn't just. It wasn't that long ago that you kind of had the box art,
Yeah.
and you maybe had some hobbyists who'd done something a bit different in a White Dwarf, and you had the early days of perhaps finding some stuff on the internet, but not really, and it wouldn't have techniques in there, certainly, and you didn't have the products available nearly as widely. I mean, we talk about Element covering every paint range under the sun, and there's there's stores in a lot of places where you can pick up more than just the one range of paints.
I've got a new local independent store that is a little bit closer than the other ones and stocks just everything. And it's like,
nice.
oh, I had to tell our gaming group, I'm like, by the way, guys, there's paints that aren't easy to get. They're here.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no, I can't have 100 different paint lines. It's not going to happen. Can't do it.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Tell me about it. I
Yeah,
get
and they
hooked on
work
these
slightly
sorts of
differently.
things.
I'd forget which ones work with which, and
Yeah.
no.
Then you've got to start
Stuff.
keeping a little notepad about all this. You can turn it
I
up
mean, I
to
do that
11.
anyway. That is
It's actually a really
always
good tip.
always. It doesn't have to be a notepad. There's things like Evernote. There's Google
Yeah.
Docs. Like I use Google Docs spreadsheets.
Big fan.
Page
Big fan
page
of.
page per army,
Yeah,
and literally just like skin. White skin this, dark skin this, bronze skin this, and just write it all down, stage by stage,
definitely.
because you guarantee there will be a time when you cannot remember
And it's
how you did
frustrating when you're
something.
trying to recreate it. Yeah, I completely agree. Even just a set of just which paints did I look at with this would be handy in whatever form that takes.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the Paint Rack app. It's on iOS. It's really good. Not least of which it is a paid app, but it's not. It's a one-off payment. It's quite a couple of quid. It's not much. It has color comparisons across ranges. That's super handy, as well as being able to
Yes.
track
Yeah.
paint
That's
schemes and
that's
projects and
good.
things. But that's unusual. Well, particularly when you're following those things, you think, well, what paints do I already have? I don't necessarily go out and buy a full new set of paints just for this one thing. Maybe you do if you want to get that color exactly.
Mm-mm.
But I think I've seen that in a few tutorials where people say, this is what I used, but actually use whatever you've got that's kind of close that you think you want to do. And that app kind of helps with stuff like that. But yeah, there's just a lot of things out there that you could pick out. Like, yeah, it's a really good point because Miles, I think, is really interesting when you get into that higher end of painting, particularly. You get really distinctive styles where you can say, okay, but those are usually linked with techniques and a way of approaching it. Like, do I want to go for something that looks really weathered and
So
something like that?
yeah, what's interesting is I actually think the better painter you are, okay, so you might have recognizable, but you can also copy other styles. I think it's interesting to note that I remember talking to, what's his name, Brandon at GMM Studios, who
Mm-hmm.
does a lot of the did a lot of the Adepticon, like they give away armies, and won a number of best armies at 40k. Adepticon 40k for other people commissions. He'll do, like, someone will commission him to do 5,000 points of 40k, and he'll do a backdrop and everything with it. Fantastic painter. And we were talking, and he was like, we got on. We were talking about some style of paint. And I was like, I can't undercoat white because of the nature of the way I paint. He goes, I really quite like how you leave the black right in the recesses. And I'm like, it's not a conscious thing. It's just I'm not I'm not that good. Like, so, I don't try too hard to get into all those places. And he's like, but it's almost a style. It's almost a thing in that. And then just knowing you have that in the way I paint means I have to make choices about the way I paint, and therefore it becomes a thing without necessarily consciously having to be a thing.
Mm.
And we all have little bits and pieces that we're better at or not as good at.
You do discover this, and it's why you sort of get. It's always tempting to encourage people to experiment with new techniques and things, or try different techniques when you're experimenting. But that's going to suit certain people. Some people are just going to be like, I just want to get these on the table, so I just want to know how do I spray them, and I just want to play games with them. But there are other people who are going to explore painting, particularly if this is a new force where perhaps you've played Heresy before, or you've played another game, and you think, actually, I've got comfortable with painting miniatures. Maybe I'm going to experiment with something else here. There's enough examples out there you can try different things. I mean, there's a friend of mine who's trying out painting Titanicus, he wants to try putting contrast on. He knows contrast it isn't going to sit particularly well. It's going to be challenging to get a smooth finish over large plates. So he's experimenting with using contrast as a base and then stippling on the contrast to give it a textured look. And he says that's a technique that he's particularly enjoying, so it suits him. He's found a technique that he likes the look of, enjoys, so he's more likely to continue with and go through. We've got so many of these different ideas that are being thrown around that you can go out and say, okay, I'm going to look at it. I mean, I look on Facebook, for example, on one of the just as things get posted every day, I'm saving people's posts. You go
Sure.
save this article into a Sons of Horus folder. kind of thing. And now I can just go in there and go, oh yeah, which ones did I like? Oh yeah, this whole set is cool. What's the common thing between all of these? Okay, clearly I'm going to want to try and do them like this, and I can experiment with that. I love that. Just to be surrounded with those inspirations is really cool. And just think we're in a great place to be able to try all of those.
For sure. I think with that comes a pressure that people have to be then utilising those things to create the best things they can and whatever. And when you're on Twitter or
actually.
whatever, you see a lot of people saying things. Oh, this was a great model. I really enjoyed painting this model. And again, there's it's a subtle social pressure to enjoy what you're doing and whatever. And this is part of the reason why I'm very open in saying I don't really enjoy painting. Right? I enjoy having painted models. I don't enjoy painting. That's why it takes me forever. I now am looking at my space rules, and I'm going to. You talk about resources. I know I'm lucky enough that I know I can message Rich, I can message Henry, Andy Wardle, all these people because I know them.
Look at you, name
and
drop.
say,
who's this guy?
And say, how do I paint this? I can message Neil Hollis, and I know actually there's a good chance that the advice they give me is going to be not that useful because I'm not where they are painting. So for them to, there will be things, don't get me wrong, they will understand, particularly the better teachers of those will understand that, I'm not trying to do what they're trying to do. But there's also that level of, I am lucky and I know other people as well, people who work for GW who are very much the bosh it on the table. Right, get it done, get it painted, get it looking good. And I need to go and talk to a couple of those about some very simple stuff, just that I need to get set in my head. I don't necessarily think for some people it's easy to watch a YouTube video and do that, or to read a blog.
Well, there's a conversation. Who was it who did that? It might have been on this Wargamer. Someone did there was a conversation about the people how to respond to different types of learning. Some people respond to visual learning, some people respond to written, some people respond to obviously different things. Some people love being face to face, sitting down, being shown a technique and respond to that. Other people are like, no, I need to do this on my speed. I need to do it in this way. I need to do it through experimentation. I need to do it through touching, not reading and researching. I over-research things myself, and then I can end up in completely in decision paralysis. I'm like, oh my god, I don't know which way to go. I'm having a crisis, as anyone who's talked to me about me painting Blood Angels is absolutely the case. I need to get this exact shade of red. I mean, talk about pretension. It's just ridiculous. But you're completely right, though. You do end up, you can pile on too much pressure that way, and it becomes frustrating, actually. So
and trying to be too perfect, and all those kind of things, and perfection is the enemy of finished.
Yes.
However, the many phrasings of that state are saying
finished, not perfect.
Yeah, finished, not perfect. All those different things, and I think it's an important thing to try and work out, and then focus on what is your purpose for painting. Because it's very easy to get sucked in to go and watch, we both watch Cult Paint's videos, and they are very good at putting across various viewpoints. However, Andy, Matt, and Rich are competition painters now. Right? They want to push themselves. When they talk about not painting to the top level, they're not dropping their levels that much. Henry, to a lesser extent, is more talking about that army painting and does it. And they all talk about it very well, but their unconscious bias is towards competition painting. So it will always push that way.
And you said, that's actually an interesting comparison. I don't think a show's gone past where I haven't said something about Cult of Paint because I'm such a fan. But with their method of doing it, because I think it is a very considered and it's a very effective method of describing how to do things. There was a very interesting video went up in their army painting series, or their Legion painting series, I should say. They covered their Sons of Horus tutorial. It's the latest in their set of Legion tutorials. That was Andy's did that one, whereas the majority of the others have been done by Henry, if not all. Henry's approach was one of taking an approach to getting armies on the table. Andy's was the same, and he was very specifically painting his own set of an army there of Sons of Horus. However, it was interesting seeing as you say, he's taking that competition painter type of thinking, where you're taking quite a high level of color theory, paint theory, mixing paints, etc. He wouldn't let, for him to consider that successful, to get what he wanted, he had to mix a paint to create the tone that he wanted, the particular color he wanted, to match the color plates that you see in the Forge World books and other places now. That was very much what he wanted to achieve, and the only way he could achieve that was mixing paints. Compare that with Mark Bedford of Forge World fame, doing his army painting series, where he, very specifically, his suggestion, it's only a suggestion, was if painting an army, pick a color that already exists that you're not having to mix, because mixing it is tricky if you're doing that. Certainly, if you're doing that per batch, perhaps you could argue that's quite realistic in a military force. That very rarely do they have a uniform color that's truly uniform. But anyway, it's another conversation. But his suggestion was that for simple ease was just pick a color. You can get close enough, most likely, particularly with hundreds of paints in a specific paint range, of which, how many paint ranges are there? 10, 15, 20, and whatever. You could find it that way. That said, if you really you've got a very particular vision in mind, and you're comfortable with that, like you would do if you were a competition painter, where color theory, you know it front to back, you're going to pick that up, and you could say, well, the counter to that is, I'm going to mix up a batch into a large bottle. That's going to cover me for the rest of the army. Two different ways of approaching the same task, both of which are army painting.
Or the third one, I'm happy to have slightly mixed colours of shades of colour within my army.
Well,
which is, again, it's one of those realistic things which doesn't always look good, but can,
it's a particular approach.
It's a personal thing, particularly.
Your tolerance for that is hugely important. My friend, as a friend of mine who buys a lot of his, he knows he has a very limited amount of time that he has to do hobby. He largely buys most of his models secondhand, painted, and has quite a high tolerance for how close they are in terms of paint schemes. I was at his house the other day. We were comparing Imperial Fists. Some absolutely like lemon, bright yellow. Others look like they just climbed out of a swamp. Same force. Now he's absolutely happy with that, particularly when he can then adjust them. He has certainly more than enough hobby skill to be able to tie those back in together. But he would rather have that variation because he'd rather be playing games. He doesn't enjoy painting in the way that some people, that is the hobby. For me, building the models I enjoy that. That's one of my favourite parts of the hobby, bizarrely, because I've heard so many other people say they just try and push through that. And you've mentioned it about painting, for example. Finding out where I find it fascinating that it appeals to people in so many different ways. One of the best parts of the hobby is that it covers so many things. But it's interesting to see where people's particular talents lie.
It's another thing to consider at the end of the day. When you're right, you've got a plethora of options. You can go to YouTube, you can go to Duncan's Painting Studios. You can go to all these privately funded stuff. You can go to Joe Blogs on Twitter, and they'll usually tell you how they paint stuff. Might be slightly more simplistic, but everyone has an unconscious bias to the way they do things. Everyone has a style. Everyone has a system, and understanding. And they don't always talk about it. They don't always understand it. But from the outside, once you've viewed a little bit, you can usually see like a style, and you get an understanding of how they paint the way they do. And it's just being aware of that, because it can make things easier or harder, or it can make the process of what you want to do. Like, it might be that, I don't know, painter X has the perfect color that you want, and person Y has one that you'd be very happy with, but person X takes 8 different layers of paint to get there, and person Y takes 2. And you know what? Maybe you're the 8 maybe you're the 8 layer way, maybe you're the 2 layer way, what have you. Maybe there's processes that you just don't like doing
Mm.
in painting, and you're like, yeah, I'm not even touching that. I want to do these methods that all have to be taken into account. Uh, at the end of the day, it's getting the models that you want. I do think working out what you want
Mm.
right from the start, not just what colours do I want, but what am I trying to achieve with this?
Mm.
Am I trying to win best painted at an event? Am I just trying to get models on a table painted that I can, not look down at and go, oh Lord, really? Here we are again. I've been there. Like a lot
Yeah.
of people have been there. That you can look on a table and go, cool, I'm satisfied with that, and satisfied is fine. Satisfactory is a good term.
Yes,
It,
that's a pretty solid place
it
to
is a
be.
good term.
Yeah.
It's slightly
I mean, isn't that why
slightly
we do a lot of this?
debilitating.
Yeah.
People go, well, that's satisfactory. Like, no, satisfactory is a positive thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Or and you go, yeah, where do you want to be? Where do you want to be doing? Now, do you want to make a few characters stand out
Mm.
and have the rest of the army, different within that? And then what for all that for all airbrushing, people talk about 3D printing the way they used to talk about airbrushing. Um, it's not for everyone. Either of those are not for everyone. Airbrushing is not for everyone. For some people, it's more hassle than it's worth. Yeah, my airbrush doesn't get used a huge amount. You know what I bought for when I redo my Space Wars? A load of spray cans.
Yeah.
Because
I think
that'll
I
be most of the model done.
I don't think that should be underestimated. What
No.
you can do with spray cans, you can get a long way. You can get quite a long way along a path with the spray cans, and then you can just finish up the rest, and you wouldn't know. And you sort of think that pressure. That's a really interesting one. It's a sort of a subtle social pressure. Say, oh my goodness, I need to really push. Now that's quite cool if it's pushing you on, and you're taking enjoyment out of that. It's like being slightly pushed into doing something, as long as you're enjoying going along with that ride, rather than it becoming making it suddenly becomes a chore, and that would be a shame.
Or pushing you down a road that you're not quite happy with going down.
Yeah, yeah,
Because I mean, I've kind of done it with armies, and gone, why have I done it this way? And it's because that's that's one of the three ways of doing it.
because I
Like,
saw
actually,
the thing and it looked
is
super
it?
cool. Mm.
Or could I have taken a couple of steps back and gone, how else can I get around this? And that's where, if you get a chance to talk to Mark Bedford, someone like Mark Bedford, like the man paints a lot of models. They're all really well done, but none of them have difficult skill sets or major, like massive, like kind of time investments in any part of it in that respect.
We just again look at how
He's very good at the basics. He's very good at the basics, and I think that's something as well that I haven't put enough time into. So things like Mark will chip everything up and do it, and Rudgy was another one actually. I remember painting, was it my knights? And I've got a very clean style on my knights. And he's like, oh, great, and then get your sponge and then just go at them. And I'm like, no, that doesn't work for these people. It's fine. Yeah, it means they take longer, but I'm happy with that. That's not a problem. Well, actually, maybe moving forwards, I do a bit more of that. Might have to talk to Reggie, actually. I haven't talked to him in a while. But some hobby.
Yeah, and it's interesting seeing how their techniques. I've had the pleasure of being in a couple of the seminars that Mark in particular has done over army painting, and equally when you look at there was the very influential Forge World Masterclass books that came out, which was taking traditional historic modelling techniques and then applying those to Warhammer models, which perhaps hadn't been done as widely before, and they captured it there. When those were coming out, they were talking about, it was still in the era of get the clear floor polish and use that as a particular varnish, or a mix up your wash using this and that and these different products which may or may not be available. There was some obscure, certainly at that time it would have been quite difficult to track down some of the products that were being suggested. Now you've got pre-made washes, you've got pre-made oil washes, panel liners, which are far more accessible. You go to any of the online sort of bigger online stores. some of them
What
not even, and you can get all of those. So it's made those basics more reliable. I'm not going to say easier, they're more reliable.
quite funny actually, because you talking about those books and the people at Forge World. So Phil
Stachynskis? Oh dear, I'm now embarrassed
Phil
about
S.
murdering this. Yeah.
Phil S. As his name, was a big name in the military modelling and all that. Like won a lot of awards and brought a lot of that over and did those masterclass books and things like that, and taught a lot of people within GW lots of stuff across the board with painting and things like that. What's interesting is you look at a lot of the models that are in books or shown online as examples of heresy stuff. Now you can go back to the, for want of a better word, the heavier metal, like the top level painting where Matt Cain was doing it beforehand, and they've got the teams now doing it. That's one thing. But a lot of the models that are shown, like when Death Guard stuff was shown off, it was all Rudgies because he was quick at painting, he could throw it up. They did a lot of that. Mark Bedford's got loads of stuff in the new books. They've always shown bits of his stuff off. Andy Hoare has got models kind of everywhere. When when people talk about the way to play heresy, they often remark back to an era when Alan was in charge and it was all rosy and everything was fine, and that era never really existed in the way they think it does, right? Because they think it was like the people who are involved now weren't there where they were, and they look at it like it was all balanced, and it was like, yeah, like Cerberus and Typhons, like I can assure you they were terribly balanced right back at the start. And the painting seems to be a little bit the same. Like, oh, we must do this, and heresy is this, and heresy is that, and heresy is oils, and blah, 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 blah. And you're like, hold on, like, let's go and look at Mark's stuff. Like, he weathers and things like that, and he's very good at what he does. But he's not like out there doing stuff that anyone else can't do. It's pretty straightforward, well executed, and as I say, doing the basics is probably the one thing I need to go back and get better at. I think I've concentrated on other things at various points. Actually, let's go back and let's make sure that dry brushing, if I'm going to use dry brushing, that I'm using the right tools, doing it the right, in a way that works. And looking at how I do dry brushing, I'm very lazy with dry brushing. I don't take enough paint off the brush and those things like that, and then that causes problems down the line. And and I think for me, and maybe quite a few others, by taking a step back, by getting the fundamentals in place, would help me. Because also, when you are painting, when you're getting frustrated because you're not getting the result you want, that's just that's a never-ending spiral.
It is, and surprisingly demoralising when that does happen. I remember experimenting early days with when I was painting Mortis for Titanicus, and I was like, oh, I'd love to do a candy red for the red on those. And this was before I'd got back into using an airbrush, because I used an airbrush many years ago. Got frustrated at the amount of time. It's like initially, it's like, oh, this is cool, and then it would clog, and then I'd be like, oh, right, that's going to take me 45 minutes to an hour to clean the damn thing. And I was thinking, it's doing that every session. Am I actually saving it? And it was putting me off using it. I basically put it in a box and didn't touch it for a few years. Eventually got it back out again. Absolutely love it again. You push through it and you become much more comfortable with the whole thing. Great. Learn a new skill. Thoroughly enjoy it. Cool. But there was a long period where I was avoiding it and was looking at rattle cans and alternatives. At that point, thought, right, okay, I'm going to try one of these candy reds. I don't really want to use the airbrush. Let's see if I can do this with a brush. Let's try a couple of these different candy reds. I've got a Tamiya. I've got an Angron red, I think it was at the time. The Angron red was infinitely easier to use. You could just brush that on, and you were getting 80% of the way towards what I was trying to achieve. Tried it with the Tamiya, which everyone had been reporting. Great, yeah, great for an airbrush. Absolute nightmare applying it with a brush. It was almost cutting through the layer underneath it.
I
It's
can
claggy,
imagine.
sticky mess. It's one of the very few times I've become really frustrated with a painting process. Whereas since then, I've actually been doing some Thousand Suns with an airbrush. It's one of my favourite colour schemes because it just looks cool and it's got this depth to it. Absolutely love it. So you can revisit things, but when you do have a paint scheme that is not working out, as you say, take that step back, and perhaps you've pushed into it. Oh, I've seen that thing, and it's going to be really cool, and I'm going to do that. Either you've got to really push through that because you've got a very particular view in mind, and nothing else will do, or, as you say, step back. Let's look at some other ways I might achieve this, other techniques. Otherwise, actually, let's go and look at how do I dry brush? Is dry brushing the right way? I mentioned Darren Latham again the other day. I think he's got 3 Space Wolves he did recently. Very different techniques across all of them. Very interesting to see how one might tackle completely different techniques, including the wonderfully named slap chop technique of the get a good black and white scheme, monochrome scheme, not just zenithal, but essentially start there, maybe even dry brushing in some highlights on there with some white, and then applying colour with transparent paints, compared with a traditional layer paint approach, compared with the third one, which was an airbrush one. 3 different ways, all look great. Subtle differences between them. If one way is not working for you, like you say, you're just not getting on with dry brushes, ended up chalky or whatever, the brushes you've got, you're absolutely killing each brush or something. Stop, go and look at a different technique. Suddenly that's going to be one that suits you more.
I think it can be easy to focus so much on the new thing you're learning and not understand that the problem is somewhere else. For plenty of people, they got the basics because they paint a lot. I think particularly if you don't paint every day, or very regularly, you can get out of the habits. And some people do get to do that, and great, crack on. Some people don't. But fundamentals will always be those building blocks of where you're working. It is. I mean, you're much better off when I joined. Right, I say access to paints, access to the repository. I'll tell you what I was going to say. That's what I was going to say. So for all these people online that you can go and look at their videos and read their blogs and what have you, for all of that, I think some of the best advice and help I've got is from my gaming group, because they're there, they're accessible. Like, I'm friends with a lot of people in the gaming group, and I can say, dude, any chance you can show me how you do this? And to be able to sit there and watch it and then feedback, you might be able to Patreon or whatever, but it's hard when you're not there next to them. But there are for every Richard Gray out there are 100 other people under him who will be able to help you out.
There's some, as you say, and it's having those conversations about those one or two little things. With good reason, we're sort of focusing this on paint in particular. It's one aspect of it, but it's amazing how just one little change, one little thing, can suddenly make the whole process that much quicker. Glue, it's almost just like I was looking at. I remember a while ago now, I was just looking at some of the basic things that we're doing when we're building models, and like, what are the things I'm just sort of putting up with, and you're sort of struggling through. I mean, my day job training was, well, if when you're building a model, you should always use the sharpest knife you possibly can, because it was amazing the number of people trying to make little architectural models or whatever with foam board, which is if you've ever tried to make terrain out of it, you do that with anything other than the sharpest knife possible, and it is an absolute nightmare. You're just tearing it every time you cut it, whatever. Using a sharp knife, knowing that you've got a knife that's nice and that you're comfortable with that. So having proper glue. Oh, I say proper. Suddenly discovering there are these thin cements that you don't have to worry about a little needle that gets clogged every 5 minutes. You can have one with a little brush. Having a different type of super glue. Just interrogating those tools you're using and saying, is there something I could be doing differently here that makes this easier?
Do you know what's crazy? Right, so I'm building a Leviathan at the moment.
Yeah.
And I am terrible. Like the one thing. So I spoke to the guy who designed the Contemptor kit, who I'm assuming did the Leviathan. That's an assumption. The one thing he said about the Contemptor was I should have put lugs in it for a standard pose, which you could then snip off to change the pose. He said that's possibly the one thing we missed out. And I'm like, yeah, because I would build it in that standard pose and just go, the ability to go click, 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 it's in. Because building, Contemptor has got and a Leviathan, you've got five or six bits to the legs, which you have to get all in position first to make sure it will then fits and works properly in his level and what have you. And I have tried blue tacking stuff before, but I've never done it properly, and it's always looked wrong. And this time I was like, no, big chunk of blue tack, right? Pull a bit off here, put it in there, do this, and it's still I'm still not a fan of having to do too many different parts at once. So I was like, stuff it. I'm going to glue this leg, and then we'll go from there with that. And it's better than my ones before. It's not perfect, but it's better than the ones I've done before, because I actually just, rather than thinking, oh, here we go again with another Dreadnought bottom, the first one's always terrible. I was like, no, let's stop, get the blue tack out. I say it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's a lot better than the leaning back Dreadnought or the Dreadnought with his foot in the air, because you've got it slightly wrong. Like, we've all done it to a point at some point. Like the flipping Vorax, and every time I built 3 Mechanicum things, like Thalax, Vorax, or whatever, the first one was always terrible. Always. And I don't like doing it. There's too many bits. Naff.
And you hear that a lot, and you think, well, what makes those things easier? Just look at what techniques are out there and think this. If I'm having trouble with this, someone has probably also, most people have probably had trouble with this. I wonder if there are any other ways of looking at this. And I found the Tamiya thin cements, and there's a bunch of them now. I think AK do them. A whole bunch of people do them. They changed the way I was using glues. For years, I was using the Revel plastic cement with the little needle that you have to run a lighter under when it gets blocked. And I was like, oh God, it looks like I'm up to all sorts of things with this. This is mad. Getting those little brush glues out. You talk about Vorax and things like that, the resin kits, suddenly discovering the gel super glues, which have that little bit of reposability. Yes, please, thank you very much. Super glue activators. There's usually a solution to the problem, but getting those basic tools, just having a quality knife and quality snippers, away you go.
Yeah, I definitely think for resin now we're going to get more people playing with resin, more resin than they've used before, because they're coming in from other game systems. And we have to buy resin for this game for the special bits. I'm over resin. Give me plastic all day long. You might encounter a bit of you should be able to do this. You should be able to work with resin. You should be able to do that. It's like, well, why? Why should we have to?
Why should this be harder than it used to be?
Exactly. Yeah. And put your hands up and just particularly if you're not a massive fan of doing something, it makes it that much harder to be into to do it, because you're looking at it, everything's a turn off, as it were.
I built, while we were still in the house, so we're talking probably 6 months ago now, I built a Proteus Land Raider. Right. I enjoy building model kits. It's part of, as I said earlier, it's one of the parts of the hobby I enjoy a lot. Built that Proteus Land Raider. My goodness, that was a commitment. It was 3 days, 3 sessions, 3 fairly hefty sessions of getting the damn thing put together. And I enjoy that. And I had a real sense of satisfaction when I finished. But I thought, if you didn't enjoy this could really annoy you. And it would then be a shame to have people put off and not taking on more of an army or expanding their army in a way they would want to go, just because they've been put off from working with this material. Metal before it was a whole other ballgame. Challenging materials to work with, my goodness. I hear what you.
I've got 2 dire wolves sat on my my window there actually at the moment that I've got sent from GW, and someone's going to build them for me because I'm just like, nah. Because again, if you want to pose the legs on that, you've got to cut the pistons and then maybe just insert your own metal rods. And I'm just like, I don't enjoy it. Don't want to do it.
No.
Again, limited time. If I didn't podcast, I'd have a bit more time. But hey, limited time baby coming along is only just like, I'm sure at some point we'll get to a system where they can entertain themselves every now and then, and I can have them in here with me and doing things like that, But even then, you're going to be looking up every 5 minutes, if that, or every 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds. There's nothing to be ashamed of. But if you don't like an aspect of the hobby, there's always a way around it, though. So, yes. Anyway, we should probably leave that there. I think
it's an interesting topic, and we could probably be more specific. We can probably follow this up with some more specifics, because we could do a deep dive into specific areas. This is more an intro, I feel, but it's a sort of a review of the state of the hobby. I think is an interesting conversation you have when you're meeting people who are starting out in this. I mean, there's been a lot to talk about where do you start with the heresy, because it's a new edition, but there are people still coming to it now who maybe through putting their first few Marines together, and you're looking at, actually, which Legion am I going to go for? How am I going to do this? What am I going for? And we've just got, we're spoiled, aren't we? In a good way.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, please get hold of us if you're an old timer who is fed up of certain things and has found good ways around certain things. If you're new and have questions about that kind of thing, and maybe we can move that into a topic in itself, or deal with a specific issue, what have you. Please feel free to send them in, greg@theimperialtruth.com, or reply to this post on Facebook or Twitter or wherever or wherever you find it. Let us know, because there's it's a big part of what we do. We sit here a lot and build and paint, much more than we play usually.
Yes.
But that's before we've even got to train. But there we go. Next episode, I'll be able to talk about my train, because I bought something that Howard wanted.
Outrageous.
But anyway, we'll leave that there, and we'll finish up by talking to Jack as a follow-up to last episode's chat about gaming etiquette and different things like that. But we'll see. Cheers, Howard.
Good talking to you, buddy. Speak soon.
And you, man. Take it easy. Hello, I'd like to welcome Jack to the show. Hey, Jack, how you doing? Excellent. So last episode I did mention Jack, and if you listen to Full Stride, he gets mentioned every now and then when we play some Titanicus. We are club members, being around the same area and all that. But I think for this conversation, it's pertinent to go through your wargaming history, recent history at least, of you're a tournament player, aren't you?
I am. For about 22 years now, I think I've been doing tournaments. So it's something, God, saying it like that. I think it was the Student National Championships when I first got into it when I was at university, age about 18, and now I'm about 40. So yes, it's about 22 years. But I've been doing old fancy tournaments, 40k tournaments, now Age of Sigmar tournaments, never quite Titanicus, but pretty much I enjoy the competitive gaming and the social scene that goes around that as much as I do amassing far too large a horde of models and gaming on a Tuesday at the Hydra.
All the usual. Yeah, absolutely. I think it is pertinent to address the fact you're not just a competitive gamer, you're quite a good one in the Age of Sigmar scene particularly.
Yeah, so I'm currently actually Age of Sigmar team captain for England. We've won the last 2 World Championships. I've done about 8 years of England ETC, and I've won the Masters a few times, as well as most of the...
First player to get 400 points on the Warhammer rankings. Won, all the big events in the UK, won them all. Yeah. So we're talking about...
Even won a 40k event that I went to, so,
There we go. I mean, I consider myself to be a decent Warhammer player back in the day. I've won an event. I haven't won multiple. I wouldn't dream of entering the Worlds on Team England, because I'd have to step my game up. Whether I could or not, who knows? But I'd have to try and step it up. So we are talking about one of the best players in England for sure, and one of the better players in the world at toy soldiers.
I know it's nice to be good at something, isn't it, Greg? I probably could have picked
I mean, it's still an achievement at the end of the day. You look at some, particularly back in the old days of Warhammer, when England came close a couple of times. There was some serious game playing going on.
Yeah, my wife and my mum are proud of me. I'll take that.
Exactly. Yeah, my mum's still proud that I represented Northern Ireland once at the Six Nations. So we take what we get, absolutely. And I wanted to get Jack on because we talked about it a little bit last show. Not just the winning, but you also win best sports at some of these events whilst winning the event.
Yep.
So there's not much you can say to that without saying yes, I'm wonderful. But it's become more of a topic to actively talk about, is how to be a sporting opponent. And I suppose it's the trouble is there's lots of terms that get thrown out, like whack. If you're a tournament player, you are whack. You are win at all costs if you want to win the event, and that's a myth. Well,
it's not. It's there is a minority. It's
yeah.
So there's definitely people you will meet in all walks of life, including some tournament gamers who want to win at all costs. But thankfully, that is not the majority, and typically, it's not what you see represented, especially at top tables of tournaments.
No, indeed. How do you go about, right from the start, how do you go about trying to make sure the game's fun? I mean, is that something that you actively think about before you get to an event, or is it ingrained now to you to a point?
Well, it's a really interesting point, and I think throughout my very long tournament history, I may be probably some of my opponents would not say that I was the most fun person to play against. So it's also something that I've worked on, and I think I have evolved and matured at. And typically, you see with most gamers, they go through a slight evolution of being very keen, wanting to win more than anything else, and doing that not necessarily in the right way. And then you kind of come over that peak where you either accept your level, i.e. you're either good at the game, you're medium at the game, you're bad at the game, you're happy with that, and you just play for the enjoyment at that level. And typically that's where the games get more enjoyable. But I think, although you asked about tournaments, I actually think it's just more about playing a game of something. And for me, it's all about the expectation of it. And just to give you a few examples, and for me, that's the main way you have fun. That's the main way you become a good sports person. So I played at a club game recently, and I turned up, and my opponent turned up. And normally we're quite good at our club to kind of say, what type of game would you like? Would you like a competitive game? Would you like a friendly game? Would you like an intro game? And this person had said, no, I want a competitive game, bring the filth. And as soon as I turned up and I saw their army, I realised their version of filth and my version of filth is very, very different. So I left some of my models in my case and I didn't mention it to them because I thought that would not be a fun game for me and that would not be a fun game for them. And this is on a Tuesday night, 7 o'clock, a load of guys and some girls hanging out, having a game of Warhammer. It's not about winning. It's about having fun collectively. So it's not about playing incredibly tight games. It's not about rules. It's not about precision. It's generally about two people having fun, unless those two people turn up and say, I want to have a competitive tournament game in a very tight and precise way. And so if I then extrapolate that to, we played in England at the World Championships, we played against Denmark. And Denmark were a very, very good team. And one of the things they did when we got there is they just said, at the very start, they said, we're going to play by the rules. And I know that sounds slightly simple to say, but what they meant was, every nuance and precision of the rules we're going to play by, which means if you miss a sub-phase, you've missed it. If you do something if something's meant to happen at the start of a phase and you go to the middle of the phase, you've missed it. If you don't move something correctly, you've missed it. And that wasn't them being mean. That wasn't them trying to have an unfun game. That was them just saying, this is the rule. This is how we want to play. And I think I don't necessarily have an exact style. I think my default will be a bit more relaxed than that level of what I call precision. And so I'm generally a bit more, let's both play more by intent. Let's all just try and do what we think we would want to do, and let's remind and help each other out to a limited extent. But the problem with that is then everyone has a different interpretation of how far you take it. And so for this Denmark game, I had a lovely game against a really nice opponent, and we both played the most precise, clean Warhammer, and you focus a lot more on doing that. But that was also fun. So I think it's all the problem where you don't have fun and you don't have a nice experience is where you have a disconnect in how you're both approaching the game.
Yeah, it's quite funny. I remember playing someone who had a Warhammer podcast on the South Coast. When we played at an event, and he was a big proponent of no takebacks and all this kind of things when he was talking about England. And then we played a game, and he moved a model, went on to another model, and moved back to the original model and just shifted a little bit. And I said, "Oh, we're playing like that, are we?" And he said, "What do you mean?" And I'm like, "It's not in the rules." Like, and it was joking because it was a big wind up. But yeah, when you say let's play by the rules, it's quite hard and fast. You know what you're doing. You know the parameters you're playing in. I think you're quite right. Setting an expectation resolves a lot of issues. And you talk about going to the club and taking models out and not even telling your opponent. I think there's also an opportunity. That doesn't mean you don't have to play the game in a competitive manner.
Yes.
You can adjust your list to a level and then play that.
And also it can then, and it's difficult sometimes to do this without coming across as either arrogant or obnoxious, to kind of say, you do realise if you do that, I will do this and I will beat you. And not put quite that simply, but sometimes it's a case. And it was another game at a club and someone I hadn't played before. And I started off and I tried to give them some advice and some coaching on how they could maybe deploy a bit differently and how it might not be a very long game. And then they kind of ignored me and it was over on my turn 2. And so then I said, should we just quickly re-rack and I can help you? And actually, if you set up like this, and if you put this unit here, and then if you do this in your first turn, and then we had 3 or 4 games of a bit more of an interactive, let me help you, because actually collectively let's try and get you better at this. But again, it's trying to, especially when you don't know someone very well, it's hard to judge that without coming across as, I'm a lot better at you than the game and I'm going to beat you, and them going, no, you're not. Stop being an idiot. So again, it's about being human.
Absolutely. And I've seen it before, at the club, and I've done it where it's like, I've got one of these models, like, by the way, this is the model in my army. Just want you to know. And when I play so many games now, when I go and play 40k, I am not worried about what your army does within reason. I will say, just tell me roughly what your army does.
Yeah.
Is there a big scary unit model I need to be worried about?
One or a shooty one?
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got Abaddon. Oh, is he quite good now? Okay, right. So I need to deal with him in whatever way I want to deal with him. Cool. You've given me the keynotes of what you're doing, and I can play around that. Don't need to know all the details.
But I think where there's a lot of kind of community discussion at the moment, though, is on this. There's a discussion around playing by intent, and there's a lot of. I don't play 40k much competitively, but I follow it just because I like listening to podcasts. And it seems to be a very positive movement around just a bit, not playing gotcha, but playing cleanly. And this is what I'm intending to do, and trying to let your opponent know that they may not know every nuance of your army or your rule, but if you could do something to catch them out, you warn them of it, and so you can still beat them, but you're beating them with your rules, with them having knowledge of your rules. And I think just the issue with this, and where, I actually agree with it and I like it. And again, as always with these things, the 80% in the middle is all a lot of common sense and it's all fine. It's the 10% at the top and the bottom that make it confusing. So where is the limit to what you should be telling your opponent that you could and might do on either side of that? So, sharing them every single thing. So you're decision paralysis because you've told them every variable, versus not telling them a really key thing that you can do because it's not completely something you should have declared. It's just, but as all these things, it's more like, do you know if you do this to me, I can just do this and stop you. And your opponent, they're clearly measuring out 12 inches, going, I can do this within 12 inches, and you've got an ability that means you can circumvent that. And I'm trying not to be any system specific because it's not relevant. It doesn't matter what the game is. It could be Titanicus, it could be Blood Bowl, it could be Age of Sigmar, it could be 40k, it could be Heresy. It's all about if your opponent is planning on doing something and you're watching them do all these certain things and that they're doing something wrong, I think it's your duty, not your duty, I think it's your...
But you think they're doing something wrong because they're missing a key piece of information?
Yes.
That's open.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And it is that, but the problem is you can win games by that, and that's generally where someone has a negative feeling afterwards because they think, you knew that, you didn't tell me that, and maybe it wasn't, maybe it's about asking questions. And so one of the things I always try and do if I don't know something is I say, right, I need to do this within 12 inches, which means I need to roll X on the dice. Do you agree? And then I think then you're kind of putting the onus on them to kind of say, look, am I missing something? And then you'd hope they say, well, it would be, but I could do this, and which means it's that. And then you go, oh, okay, that means I'll adjust what I'm doing. So as always, the more you talk and the more you have a dialogue with your opponent as you play the game, that is much more likely you're both going to have a very positive experience from it. I think the only other thing it's worth. Sorry.
Well, some of that is dependent on how much they know of your army as well, isn't it?
Yes. So
if you're playing at the Worlds, the chances are the person you're playing at knows how every army plays to a greater or lesser extent. They know what the tricks are and things like that. Might miss one or two, fine. But when you go to the club, you're dealing with someone who plays occasionally. That's a whole different experience, and therefore, you do need to be more forthcoming.
Or just a local tournament where they're not as because everyone has a first tournament. And if you go to your first tournament and you play a number of people who catch you out because you've never, maybe you play in a small gaming group of 3 or 4 friends and you always play against the same armies, and then you go to your first tournament and you get played 3 armies you've never played before, or 5 if it's 2-dayer, and they all catch you out to something, and you come away thinking that was really unpleasant because I just felt like an idiot because these people kept on tricking me with the rules I didn't know. And then you oppose that with, these people said to me, oh, you do know if you can do that, I can do this. And they still beat you, and you still lose 5 games, but you come away thinking, that was 5 really nice people, and I have really 5 nice games. So it doesn't take a lot, and generally, it very rarely, in my experience, swings the result of a game, but it really swings the result of how the person feels about the game. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. And I think, for a lot of people, how you feel if you win that game.
Yes. Yeah.
I didn't just turn them over because they didn't know a rule. Like, if that happens, have you won the game, or has your army won the game?
Yeah, I agree. And
which is
and there's the other thing as well, which, and I know this is a bit more, I don't know, down to opinion or different personality types, but there is an element of trying to actually get your opponent to enjoy the game. And I know that sounds slightly trite, but if you're having you're having a game and you're having a moment, whether you're winning or you're losing, and something cool happens, some spike of dice, some thematic or cinematic moment where their hero is sitting alive and they've just somehow managed to bounce all the attacks as you're trying to swarm them down. Have fun with it. This is meant to be an enjoyable game, and that's not meant to diminish people who are not as gregarious or as engaging, because everyone has a different personality type, and that's fine. And it doesn't mean people won't have good games against you. But if you actually engage with your opponent and try and make a story and have some fun over it, that makes you both have more fun. And so there's no downside to it.
I think dice was the biggest lesson I had to learn, was getting frustrated with dice. And I remember being down
dice thrown across the room. I think we've all done that.
I've done it. I've done it in jest as well. But I'm 6'2", whatever. I'm a big guy, and when I'm like, getting angry at dice, sometimes it's a little 5'4" guy across the table from me. Yeah. I'm sure that doesn't come across that well. And I will still curse dice, but I will now do it like, usually dice don't cost you a game.
Yeah, very right. Yeah.
Every now and then they will, but very rarely will they actually cost you a game. But you're allowed to be frustrated, but there's no point getting angry. Like, it's a dice game. It's going to happen.
But also, interestingly, if you're completely, those dice, I just had the most horrendous dice roll. I've done it against someone, actually. There was a guy I played, it was on the final game of a South Coast, which is a big UK tournament for Warhammer, and it was literally the last game for the win, for the podium. And he was sometimes just having the most horrendous dice rolls, and he's very even, and there was no emotion, and I was getting kind of excited for him, and I was getting upset for him, and I was like, come on, give me something, this is really cool. It's either going really well or really badly, and he's just like, it's okay, just some dice. I was just like, what? And again, and I know him very well, but so it wasn't anything against him, but it was almost just kind of like, it's okay to be a bit emotional about your dice, but as you say, it's about how far you take that. So you're creating drama, because I just rolled 5 ones in a row. How ridiculous! Sigmar be praised. Horus hates me, or whatever your deity and system is. And again, it's having some fun with your own frustration with it.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that's come up recently, actually, is an opponent who is not very forthcoming with rules or lists or anything like that. How do you deal with an opponent who is seemingly going against kind of you trying to keep things secret and hidden
So one of the things I've always done personally, and I'll then flip that into what I do back, is if someone ever asks me something, and I kind of say, I don't know, they say, what does this hit on? And I say 3+, we're making it up. And then they'll say, are you sure? And no matter how sure I am, I get my book out. And the fundamental reason for that is everyone makes mistakes. Everyone gets things wrong. That's just part of the game. But if someone double checks you and you then get it wrong twice, that's lying. Because, and again, it may not be intentional, but in my mind, if that's then your duty to check the source, to then say, am I sure? Because sometimes, you still get it wrong. And again, I've definitely done it, and I've checked it, and I've gone, oh, actually, no, I was wrong about that. I'm really sorry. But thankfully, I've checked it. So then I do the flip. So if someone, says something to me, and I go, are you sure? I thought it had 3 attacks, not 4. Then I say, can you just double check? And then I ask them to get the book out, or ask them to get the app out. And if they're right, they're right. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Which is not a problem. But there's no harm in it. And I'm not calling them a liar. I'm not doing it aggressively. I'm just like, are you sure? Are you sure it was like that? I always remembered it being like this. Oh, maybe I'm getting them mixed up. Can you just double check? You just do it in a very friendly way. And typically, if you do it a couple of times and you're wrong each time, then maybe you're just misremembering the army and they know it very well. But typically, if you've not caught them out, but if they then have to change their answer because you keep on being correct and they keep on being incorrect, then interestingly, they start becoming more correct. And just the other thing, I don't know what Heresy's got or Titanicus has got, but for AoS and 40k, the app has pretty much 90% of the core rules all for free. And so sometimes someone says something to me and I'm like, I'm not sure about that. So I just quickly get the app out and check the war scroll.
Yeah.
And then
the advantage for Heresy and Titanicus is you're sharing, the majority of armies are sharing
so you've got the same army yourself.
Yeah. I've had it before in an event where I didn't trust the guy at all, and I've played him 2 or 3 times, and I've said to people I don't want to play him ever again. And that's so rare, absolutely rare. And I had to ask to borrow his book once because I didn't believe him about something, and he assured me it was right. And I turned around and said, you know what, I wouldn't mind checking what else that model can do, because I know there's loads of rules. Yeah. So if you move, and I'll just flick through the book, and then I've said, oh, by the way, did you know you played that rule wrong last time? And I think there's a key is not confronting them.
Yeah.
It's to give them an opportunity to back down.
Yes.
Or because they might genuinely just, I've always played it that way. I must have misread it the first time.
Yeah.
So.
I remember when one of the Age of Sigmar new rules just dropped in Stormcast, one of their main factions. The new book had dropped, the new system had dropped, and I went to a tournament like 2 weeks later. I painted up this new army. I got along to it, and they had this ability where they dropped down from the storm and they got -1 to hit. And I thought it was for the entire 2 turns, like the whole battle round, but it was only your turn. And I then, I won my first 2 games, and I tweeted about how amazing this ability was doing this, and I had like 10 replies saying, no, you're playing it wrong. So it's just, like all these things, I was basically tweeting publicly about how great my cheating was, so I'm not a very good natural. But what the whole point is, it was just a misinterpretation. And someone then showed me the book, and I then went and spoke to both my opponents who I'd beaten, and I checked with them. I said, "Do you want me to give you the win instead?" Because I'd incorrectly done it, and they both said, "No, you took all my models off the table, and I never got to hit you." So it was all okay. But again, it's one of those things of everyone makes mistakes, everyone gets things wrong. That's not the problem. It's only the issue is if when you've been told and then you continue to make that mistake, then that's called cheating.
I think there's a lesson to learn there as well. So if little Johnny goes to his first Age of Sigmar event and he plays you first round and you've done that, he's going to accept that there's going to be, if he knows who you are, there's a chance that he says, oh, it's Jack, it must be right.
Yeah.
And I've seen people, he had this really good rule, didn't sound right, but and I'm like, that's because it wasn't right. And they're like, yeah, but it's X from whatever podcast. I'm like, that's irrelevant, mate. You got it wrong.
No, it's true. You almost have a slight more of a burden and responsibility because people assume you know what the rules are. But and
I think it's, again, if you can know how to say, as you say, can I just check your book? Well, that sounds really good.
Yeah.
Does it work that way?
Yeah.
That kind of thing, you can say that to anyone. You're not. And that way you're not putting the pressure on them saying, I'm accusing you of cheating.
Yeah. And so hence, if you admit to it, then you're agreeing you're cheating. You're just saying, did you make an honest mistake?
Yeah. And also it takes the pressure off you asking the question as well. Because it can be hard to say, I don't think that's right.
But like most things and most people, it's really hard if someone says something smiling politely and friendly to say no. There's, if you say to someone in a really nice way, could I please just have a look at your book for 10 seconds? I don't really know a reasonable answer why they would say no.
I've had one person say no. And that's because he plays really competitive 40k now, but we were playing Warhammer, and he was getting beaten, and he didn't think he should get beaten, and he refused to give me his book. And so I turned to our good mate Dan to the side and said, Dan, lend me your high elf book. And he handed it over, and I was like, yeah, you're wrong, it's in the book.
Like I said, I've been playing tournaments for 22 years and I've never heard of that. So that's really interesting. But
he was a very young guy. I believe a little bit may have. There's a small reputation on the 40k tables as well, but they are. I played a lot of tournaments as well. Not as many as you, but over different things, and one or two over that whole time.
But I think that's the key thing, and I know. I mean, the problem, like everything, is the bad. The minority, but also those edge cases, those stories that become kind of urban legends, both within clubs, within chat rooms, across the internet, of things that have gone awry where people have been very bad sports. They make headlines, but you've got to remember now. I mean, I don't know quite what the stats are, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's 1,000 tournament games a weekend. It's across maybe per system, if not more. The game is really huge, and so if you multiply that out, the amount of games that there are, having problems is such a minority. It's almost insignificant.
Well, what's a better story? The guy who, gets up in arms because your chariot's about to run through his armies at a different angle than he thinks, and he throws it against the wall, or the guy who says, you forgot to charge those models, mate. Do you want to go back and do it?
Yeah.
Because that happens all the time.
Yeah.
You said you were going to charge them. Yeah, just charge them.
Yeah, you said they were there, but you went to the other side of the table, had no impact on everything else, and you just got.
I moved my drink in front of them. Yeah, all that.
Yeah, and that's, as you say, that's what happens in 99% of the games, because we both knew you meant to do it. There was no advantage to anything if you hadn't done it. It was just a case of, but also, and I'm not someone who believes in this, but I do find it really funny. Whenever you offer someone, not a take back, but like you forgot to shoot that model, you forgot to do that, it always fails. It never does anything.
Oh, doesn't it just? Every time I go back to cast a spell because I missed the phase.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that failed.
Yeah.
Okay,
or if I go back to, I forgot to shoot that model. Oh, I didn't do anything. Oh, I forgot to go and fight with that. Or I forgot to charge.
It happens so many times. It really does.
It must be.
It must be fake. It's what you remember, but it always seems to work out that way. Have you got any more? Like Team England, you had discussions about making sure that you were playing the right way.
Yeah. So I mean, what happened in the ETC, the World Championships, as it was before it all split. So there used to be 3 systems: 40k. Actually, there was Flames of War as well. There was 40k, the old Fantasy, Flames of War, and a few other niche ones. And there was a reputation there, both for particularly Fantasy and 40k, of very unpleasant games and very a nature of winning the game at all costs, and some not actually maybe cheating, but
pushing the boundaries.
Pushing the boundaries, yeah. And I would actually say, I mean, I did 6 ETCs, and I had 1 or 2 bad games. So I still think, like all these things, how you are as a player on the table can mitigate a positive or a negative experience. So you still have agency.
The same names used to come up all the time, to be fair.
They did. And so there were a few bad countries, stroke players, as always, but the vast majority, I had a wonderful time most of my events. But for good or ill, it had a bad reputation. And, of refs sitting at tables, of chess clocks, of angular rulers, lasers, because no one could agree, arguments, etc. And so what we did when the AoS tournament started and we sat down as Team England, we said what we want to do is we want to go along, and we don't just want to go and win the event, because that's what we've always wanted to do and never with any success. We also want to go and win the event in the right way. So when we did team selection, and when we actually went on the table, we collectively said, look, it's not about winning at all costs this game. It's not about not cheating. It's not about making sure your opponent gets something wrong or misremembers or not doing that. It's about having a fun game and getting a fair result. And we went and did that in the first ETC, which was about 3 years ago now in Serbia with COVID. And we won we got first place and we won best sports as a team. And we were absolutely overjoyed by that. And I've never seen so many grown men cry. It was quite lovely. But then we did the same again last year. And again, it was something we'd intentionally done. When we pick players, it's not just on your player ability. I'm not going to, as I'm captain this year, and I'm not going to go and pick people who are not well known to be nice, fun players on the table just because they win games. That's not what we want to be known for. We want to be known as a team who are fun to play, fair to play, and are very good at the table. But you need all three, because that's you're spending 5 days away. You're spending £1,000 more pounds. You're leaving family, all these things. You don't want to go and not have fun. It's kind of the point of all this. At the end of it,
once you've got
tiniest trophy, not much glory.
Yeah, once you've got a reputation, it sticks as well, doesn't it?
It's really hard.
Well past, and we've. There's been some notable exceptions, notable examples where people have transgressed and had to really work to get their reputation back for a variety of reasons.
You can lose it very quickly and it takes years to get back. But also we found there was one country who had a very bad reputation, and we played against them and we all came away going, my person was lovely. My person was absolutely lovely. And then a couple of them, my person was not. And it's interesting that they had, it was teams of 8, and I would say 6 or 7 of them were lovely. But the 2 that weren't meant the whole country had a reputation as being unfun to play against. And that's, all you need is 1 or 2 people who have a bad attitude, and it all goes wrong. So hence why it's just, it's not what it's about. And so, maybe they're really happy that they've won a game, or that they've won it, but they haven't done it in the right way. So I think as all of us, we all have agency. We all have accountability for this. We can all choose to play fun, friendly games. And if everyone does, then everyone has a good time. Whereas if some people don't, you and your country you represent, your club you represent, you won't have a nice time. And in the long run, people won't want to play against you. People will be watching you. People will try to catch you out because they know that you're not a very nice player back.
And all of that helps mitigate, because there's always an element of 2 people of very different character types playing, and games cannot be fun just because someone's very reserved and someone's very outgoing, and they just clash. And any instances then of dodginess going on just getting
exasperated,
expanded, exactly, becomes more of a big deal, and it reduces that. So just quickly, if you were playing next weekend AoS Game 6 against Tom's Maudsley to win it, what kind of things, you wouldn't even have to talk to Tom. You'd be able to play, but what kind of things are we talking about on that table? I mean, there's the old term like flat on the green.
Yes, yeah. So flat on the green is probably the most common one, and it comes from when all the table boards used to be painted green. And what that means, and again, I think it's one of the cleanest rules ever. And all it says is if your dice hasn't landed flat on the table, then you need to re-roll it. And that means if it's landed on a book, if it's landed on a card, if it's landed on scenery, even if all those things are flat, you still re-roll it, because otherwise, what if it's half on a card? What if it's on a book that's on an angle? It just, again, it takes away all discussion points. It's either flat on the green or it's not.
Or in a dice box, whatever you decide is your area. Yeah. I will roll here, and I will not count it unless, whether it's a 6 or a 1,
yes,
it will be ignored.
And some things like that also are depending on, so the level of, table 6, it's probably going to be a higher pressure game, and maybe you would have more things in place, especially if you didn't know the opponent. So if it was someone like Tom, who I'm very good friends with, it would be more a case of we both probably know each other's rules, ask some questions if we're not sure on something, and we just agree everything. So something like that would be, okay, I'm moving 13 inches away from you. That means you need a 9 to charge me. Okay, I'm outside of range of this, which means you can't shoot me. Okay, I'm 18.1 away here. We would play a game like that, which is so basically it's very.
And if you then did try to do that, and if you did measure and say, oh, you are, just inside that, I push you back.
Yes, yeah.
Where you were intended to be.
That, yeah. So but you play by intent, and generally all the top table games I play, we do that. So it's all, and also it's much quicker because you go, I know I could do that, I could do that. Let's just do it reasonably quickly. And so it's not that you're being sloppy. You're just saying, look. So, and also for me, actually, one of the things I'm a huge proponent of, and I advise everyone to do. So most games have an element of a move followed by a charge, or a move followed by a shoot. And that means you have to basically, sounds simple, you have to add two distances together. And it sounds really simple, but interestingly, when people do that move, it's very easy to gain or lose space, especially when you're measuring down at an angle. And I know I've been guilty of this in the past as well. So the trick is, like all these things, is you've got a model with a base and you have a point you want to try and reach to. So you put your tape measure down between your base and their base, and you agree what the total distance is. If it's 20 inches and you move 8, then you know it's 12 after you've moved. There's no dillying or dallying there. And what you typically find is people will move something and then they'll be in 11. Or they'll, and something else will happen, and then you'll go, oh, no, where were you? And you can't put it back because you don't know where it was. And so again, if you just measure that distance before any model is touched, then it's so much easier. I mean, I played a friendly game I think it was a week or so ago at the club, and the guy was doing himself out of an inch. So because he was measuring down an angle, I said, no, look, just put it flat. And it was like, oh no, you don't need that. You need this lower number to make a charge because you're misdoing it. So always measure the total before you move a model. And that really, really helps. I mean, the only other thing that some people play, and I probably will until I get comfortable playing someone, is when you roll dice, take out misses. So again, if people take out hits, it's sometimes a bit dodgy. You sure that was a hit? And we all miscount dice. You're rolling 20, 30 dice. You all just miss a number. It's just, again, it's really human nature. So if you just say to your opponent, look, we take out misses, and once we both agree that there are 8 successes there, then we roll them again. So again, it's not fast rolling so quickly that your opponent doesn't get a chance to see it. But things like that, again, that's just, if it was with Tom, I'd just wait for him to tell me how many there were. So, but again, it's
because there's that level of trust.
Yes.
One thing I am bad at is not always clarifying what I'm doing. I'm like, that unit, and I'm like, he knows what I'm doing, and then he goes, what are you shooting at? And I'm like, oh, that's this unit shooting at that unit, and then all of a sudden you're slowing it down. Something I need to get better at is this unit into that unit. Cool. And making sure my opponent is understanding of what I'm doing.
And again, sometimes that also is on the knowledge of the player you're playing against. So I used to play as a guy called Brian Carmichael. I used to do a lot of play testing against, as well as like having some practice games. And if anyone else watched the game, they would not have a clue what was going on. I mean, aside from the fact that we often use lots of empty bases and stuff, because we both knew exactly what we were rolling. So sometimes you're rolling like 6 different things, but we would just do it so quickly because we were playing a practice game together to test a book. So there was no interest for either of us to do anything remotely dodgy. So it was just the fastest speed rolling you'd ever see. It was great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that does count. But all this means, all of that put together, means when you play someone you don't know, then you can have that game, and you can say, this is how I do things. This, and this, and this, and you don't have it puts them at ease. But also, we don't have to worry about any of that.
Well, it's true, but then sometimes you can also go too far and you can put them on edge because you're setting down so many rules. So if I come up to the table to you and you've just come to your first tournament and I start and I put, I say, right, so the rules are flatten the green. Don't move your models until you've measured it. I want you to leave all your dice here until I've counted them. They may just go, whoa, hang on a second. Yeah. What I typically do is I judge the opponent, I judge the type of game, and then if I'm uncomfortable as things are going, I then will maybe increase the level of, say, diligence or oversight I'm having on what they're doing.
Sure. I was, you picked me up there because I was kind of inferring what I would say of what I'm doing.
Okay, yeah.
I would say, here's my dice tray. If it doesn't land in the dice tray, I don't count it. All my symbols are 6s. I will do this. This is how I do things. If you've got any problems with any of those or you want to question anything, feel free.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. So you say what you will do, and then most opponents.
I'm like, you do what you want to do. Yeah, and also sometimes say there's no pressure on you to do any of this. This is just how I play the game. I count wounds down.
Play the game cleanly. What do you want to do?
Well, yeah, or because some of it will seem anal to people. They're like, "Why are you doing that?" And I'm like, and then it's weird how often when you get those situations, then like that dice, which is a bit cocked, and they're like, oh, isn't that? And I'm like, well,
Yeah, but
you make the decision there and then. But it does show how, that simple rule cleans things up and moves the game swifter as well.
It does, and again, and I mean, some of this. I mean, you could play your hardest opponent game one, who you didn't know is the best player there, and so maybe you should put more of these things in. But typically, if I'm on day 2, table 1 at an event, I'm more likely to set some of these ground rules at the start, just so because the player I'm playing against is much more likely to be there also to try and win the event. Whereas most of the time, most people who are going there are going for 3-2, a few beers and a few laughs. And that's not taking away from anything from them. It's what they're there for the weekend to achieve, and that means actually they don't want all these rules. They don't want all these structure in place. They just want to go and have a fun game.
Yeah. However, there is an argument that that's when the middle tables, who may be doing that, is where some of the biggest issues occur, because the game is looser, and actually you lose that element of fun you want because.
There's a
hold on, that was a 3. No, that was a 4.
Yeah.
And then it takes a little thing sometimes to really grate on you, and then it can spiral.
And so but that's why I think you can always put that in later if you feel the game isn't going as it should. And so, as always, it is a really, as always, and it's the tricky one, because you don't want to force someone into an unfun game because you're imposing structure when they just want to have fun and roll some dice. But likewise, you don't want to get to an unfortunate situation later on where you're having a big argument over a key dice roll, because.
But it doesn't have to be symmetrical rules, does it? You can hold yourself. I will still measure for you.
Dice roll, or they've moved models, and it's cocked, or they so again and that can create as much a feel bad on yours.
It can, but you can still measure that this is my charge distance.
Yes, you can do yours.
You can do all those things whether they're doing it to you or not. You can still say, I will help make this game easier for you. That's fine. It's not a problem. I've got no problem doing that. You want to do it for me? That's cool. It's not a problem. I'll just be diligent in myself to know that I'm not doing it wrong as much as I possibly can, and crack on. I think that's a different look at it from a different point of view for a lot of heresy players, to be honest. Because I think there is a weird view from friendly narrative gaming at tournament gaming, where actually I think there's a lot that happens in friendly / narrative gaming, which could benefit from a slightly more aware approach,
structured.
Yeah, and as you say, once you know all the tricks, you know which ones you want to use. You don't have to use them.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's informed.
Indeed, having the knowledge. Awesome. Well, thanks, Jack.
No, pleasure. Always good to chat.
Good having
you at the club.
Indeed. Take care.
Cheers, Greg. Bye.
And thank you for making it to the end of another episode of the Imperial Truth. All the usual signing off stuff here, but boy, has some stuff happened between recording this and it actually being released. I'm hopefully recording this the night I'm releasing it, trying to get it out. Apologies for the delay. But yeah, loads of stuff on sale this weekend as you're listening, going up for pre-order. If you want to support the show, Element Games, you can use the link in the show notes or go to theimperialtruth.com and there's an advert on there on the banner. If you click that link and it takes you to Element and you purchase through Element, it provides a kickback to the show. We are buying more equipment, things like that. It does all help with that and hosting costs and everything else. And then if you do want to support it even more, we do have the crystal codes as well, which are in the links as well. So many thanks to any of you that do that, and thank you all for listening anyway. Yeah, there's going to be a lot to talk about next episode. As I say, we've got already had previews and lots of releases coming. It's going to be exciting. If you have any questions, any subjects, any topics, any issues, anything like that you want to ask us about, or you think we maybe talk on the show about, if you've got any feedback about what we talked today around gamesmanship and all that, then please again let us know. Greg at theimperialtruth.com. The chat with Jack, I don't know really what I expected, but maybe not quite what happened, But I think there's some interesting stuff in there. Certainly, things to think about whether you do them, whether you feel that's the right way to do it or not. And of course, that all depends on gaming groups and opponents and all that jazz. Once again, I do want to say welcome to new listeners or old listeners that have come back or anything like that. We do have new ones. The stats show that, and it's wonderful to have you with us. Please feel free to get engaged either through the Facebook. You can find us, again, all these links are in the show notes, or you can just go Google. If I go to Facebook and search for The Imperial Truth, and you'll find us there. Instagram, Child of Fang, and that's my personal Twitter as well. And of course, we're on Twitter, Imperial_Truth. Don't tweet a lot, don't post a lot. Keep saying I'm trying to get better at it. Maybe as I get more games in, been a bit quiet recently on the heresy side of things. We can hopefully maybe get a bit more of that going on. If you do love what we're doing and you think other people might, then please go and tell them. It will help us grow the community, and maybe we've got something for certain people. We won't be everyone's cup of tea. I appreciate that. I certainly am not everyone's cup of tea. But hopefully there's, I'm seeing a wide range of people now. I'm on a number of different heresy discords, and there are very, very few people who cross between those discords. It's a lot of different names, and it's great to see. There's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of stuff coming, and prepare thy wallets for this weekend. Remember, you don't have to order it all at once. You can spread it out. I know it's sometimes heresy in and of itself to say that, but you can be sensible. I mean, of course, if you want to and you've got the money, go for it. Knock yourself out. But I think I'm going to leave that there. Hopefully we've got a bit of a special show next episode. Howard and I are currently texting each other to talk about how we're going to approach it. But we shall see how that goes, and hopefully it will come out in a slightly more timely fashion. But until next time, you have been listening to The Imperial Truth.